This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate sixth and final part of What If Neglected Naruto Was a Generational Genius. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no time, let's start the story.
In Tsunami's house, Naruto sat on his knees with Shisui on his lap. The weapon was sheathed at the moment, but he did have one hand close to the hilt, ready to use if needed. Wearing light clothing, he was fine and totally unharmed. His body was prepared at a glance, and his violet eyes appeared as hard as steel. Why? The demon of the mist, Zabuza Momochi, sat in front of him and stared back at him. Following his battle with Kakashi, he had a few extra bandages wrapped around his body. Zabuza's hands were near the hilt, just like Naruto's, and the Kuchibocho was leaning against the wall next to him. Knowing that the devastation Yagura had been causing their country was now over and being rebuilt, Zabuza and Haku decided to return to Kiri, much to the relief of everyone and the impending joy of Kiri. Now that their initial objective was over, there was no better moment than to go back to their native country. Zabuza's return to Kiri would strengthen their group and provide a strong role model for the next generation of Kiri. Soon, 7 swordsmen would give birth to a new generation. Since only 2 swordsmen would do, everyone else in the room could sense Naruto and Zabuza assessing one another. For the time being, their aura was calm and serene, but they could suddenly change and start fighting like 2 alpha lions to show who was the best predator in the area. Haku sat a few feet away from her mentor, her senbons tucked under her sleeves, ready to go at any time. Naturally, she had learned about Naruto from the bingo book that Zabuza would update on a regular basis. Possessing demonstrated skills and having previously been accountable for the deaths of 2 7 swordsman members, she experienced a sudden surge of fear. Her mentor, a formidable A-ranked shinobi, was easily outclassed by this young man, who was only a few years older than her. For someone so young, such power. From the opposite end of the room, Hana and Hayate watched as they drank the tea that Tsunami had just brought to them. As the triplets ate some of the treats she had brought, Hana sat around them and caressed the tops of their heads. Although Hayate would have preferred to be among the 2 swordsmen assessing each other, he was aware that he lacked the strength and power to compete with Zabuza. He was still in his infancy. However, Team 7 was currently out with Tazuna, who didn't feel comfortable having the 2 shinobi hired to kill him live under his roof and wanted to avoid Zabuza and Haku as much as possible. Since neither Sakura nor Tazuna had attracted the attention of any of the bandits, Zabuza, or Haku during the battle, Sakura had escaped unscathed. Eiji and Sasuke suffered slightly more severe injuries due to the quantity of ice senbons that had stabbed them, whereas Kakashi only sustained minor wounds from his battle with Zabuza. In any case, Naruto and Hana had repaired them, and by the time they returned to the Leaf Village, they would be okay, though they would carry a few small scars with them. Pulling down his bandages, Zabuza mumbled, "I hear you pretty good with that blade of yours." He brought some tea to his lips. He refused to lower his defenses in front of this child. As he did so, Naruto said, "I hear you're the same. The Demon of the Mist. Such a violent title. Like Konoha's Blade Devil is any better. I dare say your reputation is even greater than mine. After all, you have killed 2 of my former comrades in the last 5 years." After a brief moment of twitching, Naruto placed the cup on the ground. He gently removed Shisui from the sheath, revealing only a small bit of metal that was still able to shine brightly into most people's eyes. "Is that a problem with you?" Most people were shocked by Zabuza's loud laugh, which even caused the Ninken to leap into the air. "If anything, you did me a favor. I couldn't stand those 2 fools." Raiga thought far too much of himself despite being the weakest of the 7, while Kushimaru was far too quiet and secretive for my liking. Even for a shinobi, the man creeped me out. "Interesting that you should say Raiga was the weakest. Of your generation, who was the strongest?" Naruto inquired. Numerous swordsmen and former swordsmen were familiar to him. However, one in particular had never provided Konoha with much information and had always hinted at him. When the strongest was mentioned, Zabuza's face instantly took on a gloomy expression. As the question was posed, even Haku, who was standing next to him, gulped and appeared rigid. "That title kid belongs to only one man. Kisame Hoshigaki, the strongest of the mist swordsmen by a large margin." Naruto wanted to learn as much as he could about the man in case he ever met him again, so he asked, "How large of a margin are we talking?" The mist swordsman did appear to be drawn to him like moths to a flame. Zabuza's hands clenched and he snorted quietly. "He wields the strongest of the 7 Kiri blades, Samahata. A living sword that grows stronger by feeding on the chakra of the person that wields it. Only a handful of people have even successfully wielded it due to the amount of chakra it takes. After observing Zabuza sidestep the question, Naruto repeated it. How powerful is he? While everyone else in the room waited and listened to what he had to say, Zabuza took another sip of his tea. I'll put it this way. The man's chakra is so dense and powerful that he is more like a tailed beast than a man. While Haku turned away, Naruto heard Hayate and Hana gasp for air. Shisui was tightly held in Naruto's hand. It was unthinkable that someone could have that much chakra. Seldom had anyone in history attained that level of chakra by themselves. That level had never been attained by any Kage. But as Zabuza spoke, Naruto couldn't help but notice the venom in his voice. It implied that Kisame and Zabuza had a past. Zabuza nodded, and Naruto questioned, "You have some kind of vendetta against him? By your reaction to just speaking his name?" Kisame Hoshigaki is responsible for killing my mentor, Fubuki Suikazan, the previous wielder of the Samahata. And then afterwards he fled like a coward. He has rarely been seen since, remaining out of sight since then. Zabuza massaged a particular area of his chest. As Haku rubbed her left shoulder, he whispered, "We ran into him once. It didn't end well or in our favor." Zabuza gave him a serious look as Naruto asked, "Any advice if I should ever run into him in the future?" Zabuza responded, "Yeah. Run and don't look back. He doesn't cut. He shreds you to pieces." The Seven Swordsmen member then rose and departed the room, with Haku trailing closely behind. Hana whispered, "Well, wasn't he cheerful?" Before noticing that Hana was blushing and gently massaging her thighs together, Naruto and Hayate both nodded. There was a smirk on his face that Hana noticed. "Why are you smirking?" He gave her a sly wink before saying, "I didn't realize you were missing Anko so much. She must take good care of you." It was not long before Hana understood what he was implying and had deduced it. Her eyes became enraged, and her pupils turned into slits, making her face even more red than before. Hana lunged at Naruto with the blonde, barely avoiding her sharp nails, as Naruto started to laugh. Before he started running around the house laughing, Naruto taunted, "Sorry Hana-chan, but I can't service you like that. For shame for betraying sweet Anko-chan." Hana chased him from behind, yelling obscenities as she attempted to make her friend pay for his taunting. With their heads cocked slightly to the side, the triplets watched their owner and partner in bewilderment as Hayate whispered, "Here they go again." With a frying pan in one hand and a broom in the other, Tsunami yelled at the two teenagers, "No running in the house." After the long events of the week, she would not allow two shinobi to ruin her home, especially not wake her son who was sleeping. Hana did not stop and immediately jumped on the blonde boy, but Naruto did. After the two fell to the ground, Hana was on top, snarling and yelling at Naruto as the boy struggled to hold her back. Despite the circumstances, Naruto was laughing, and Hana was growing irritated. However, Hayate blushed at the sexuality of their position. However, he remained silent because he didn't want Hana to try to harm him as well. "Ah, you stupid blonde bastard. I love you too, Hana-chan." A frying pan struck the back of Hana's head, causing her to see stars and fall forward before she could react further. Naruto scratched the back of his head nervously as Tsunami stood behind her, glaring at them in frustration. "Hee sorry Tsunami-chan." With a humph, Tsunami turned around and left. A little puff of smoke appeared beside Naruto as he sat up, revealing a small white tiger kitten that was easy for him to pick up with one hand. Before revealing a tiny scroll fastened to her back, the young kitten yelled, "Hello Naru-sama." She rubbed her body along his leg and purred before giving him the little scroll. "She sent me here to give you this." Acknowledging her identity, Naruto hurriedly grabbed the scroll and opened it, scanning the words written in black ink with his eyes. The little cub rolled around on the ground in delight as he tickled her stomach and patted her head while he read the scroll. The triplets did nothing but gave the cat a frustrated look. She would eventually outgrow them all combined. After he finished reading it, he glanced at the wall clock and then back at the small tiger cub. "Thank you, Mickey. You can head on back now." Before she vanished back into the white tiger's domain, she called, "Bye-bye Naru-sama." Hayate was just staring over in confusion when Hana, who was sitting up and massaging her head, finally realized what he was doing. Hana inquired, "What's that you have there?" He lied, then got up and put on his sandals, saying, "Oh it's nothing. Just something from my summons. I'm going to run a boundary check on the area. Make sure none of Gado's goons have tried their luck now that Gado is gone." Hana responded, "I'll come with. I need to run off some steam now anyway." She started to get up, but Naruto stopped her. Naruto patted her shoulder and walked to the door, saying, "Don't worry Hana-chan. I got it. It won't take me long." When Naruto left the room, both of his teammates watched him leave, and Hana turned to face Hayate in bewilderment. When Hana said, "Well, that was weird. What do you think that was all about?" Hayate simply shrugged his shoulders. He coughed and raised his cup to Tsunami, who gladly accepted his request for more tea, saying, "No idea. It was no weirder than usual." With a sigh, Hana turned to face the path Naruto had taken. What exactly was the reason behind her friend's abrupt departure? Wave Forest's Naruto was forced to move quickly as he steered clear of jagged bushes and branches. Despite his movements, his footsteps were silent, and he was constantly scanning his surroundings with his keen senses. It had been killing him nearly every day that he hadn't seen the woman he was searching for in more than 6 months. They had a very special night together and said some very memorable things during their last meeting. He cherished every moment and recalled every look at her, even though they had not spent more than a day together in more than 2 years. They had been able to meet a few times over the course of 2 years. They were able to message each other frequently with the aid of his summons, which kept their relationship going and alive. Additionally, a few photos, presents, and souvenirs were exchanged. Before coming to a halt at the foot of a large tree that was noticeably taller than the others, he muttered, "I know you're here somewhere." Even though it was only 10 minutes, he stood at the base of the tree for what seemed like hours. He soon detected a blip on his sensors and sensed a chakra source approaching. It was powerful. Jonin was at his highest level and was rapidly approaching him. Before he prepared himself for the person who was approaching, he turned in the direction it was coming from. Before long, a slender figure in a gray cloak rushed through the trees and sprang from the top of a branch. The figure sped in his direction and slammed into him, sending both of them to the ground. As the figure rolled across the ground, Naruto encircled it tightly with his arms, knocking away a few passing rabbits. Naruto was on the bottom when they stopped rolling across the ground, and the cloaked figure was straddling him on top, their legs firmly by his side. Naruto felt a pair of warm lips start attacking his before he could speak or take any action. Rather than displaying surprise, Naruto joyfully started to return the kiss as his hand swiftly reached the hood and removed it. Her hair was still shorter than most, but it had grown out a bit to just fall to her shoulders. Her body had become even more womanly than before, with shapely hips and a butt that Naruto couldn't resist letting his hands roam around, and her pink eyes glinted mischievously. Even though her chest was not nearly as large as Hana's or Anko's, it gave her a beauty that gave her a more sexual appearance. Naruto started to sit up, making sure the woman on his lap didn't try to get away, and Kurotsuchi of Iwa sat contentedly on top of her leaf shinobi lover before being transferred to his lap. They were still kissing, reciprocating each other's repressed emotions with hunger. They had been getting together whenever they could for months at a time since they first met at the Fire Daimyo's palace 2 years prior. Soon after, feelings started to develop between them, and they soon became boyfriend and girlfriend. However, for apparent reasons, neither of them told their families. An Iwa shinobi is dating a Konoha ninja. Hell freezing over would be preferable to both villages. In between kisses, Naruto said, "Kami, I've missed you. It's been way too long." Kurotsuchi's hands started stroking his blonde hair. "It has. These last 6 months have taken their toll on me. I've lost count how many times I wanted your summons to bring me to you in Konoha. Or you to Iwa." With his violet eyes gazing into her pink ones, Naruto smiled as he briefly broke the kiss. "I can't imagine our families would be too happy about that. My mother has already began trying to find me a nice girl to settle down with lately. And I know once I go back home she will hound on me about it." Kurotsuchi put her head forward and took gentle nips at his ear before whispering back into it, "Oh, I can imagine. But do you really want to talk about our families right now or just enjoy the moment we have together?" As his thumb lightly caressed her cheek and his hand cupped the side of her face, Naruto grinned. "How much time do we have?" "Not much time. No more than an hour. If I'm gone longer than that, my unit will be wondering where I am." As soon as their lips met again and their hands started to unclothe each other, Naruto replied, "Then let's stop staling and just enjoy the hour we have together." Their clothes fell to the ground before their portion of the forest was filled with gasps and moans. The house of Tsunami the day was rather dull now that they didn't have a crazy missing ninja and his apprentice trying to kill Tama well. They were still around, but at least they weren't trying to kill them anymore. "Oni-chan, we're back," Eiji yelled as he dashed into the bridge builder's house to find his older brother. Kakashi, Sasuke, Sakura, and Tazuna entered behind Eiji as he ran into the living room, expecting to see Naruto, but instead he saw Hana and Hayate alone with a recently returned Haku. The girl was in the middle of pinning up her hair with a par of senbons when Eiji entered. Since Gato was gone, life in Wave Country was gradually getting back to normal, and Tizuna appeared to be quite happy with the bridge's construction. Many of the town's other builders had started coming back to work on the bridge. Wave was finally starting to recover after going through hell. Naruto went out to check on Eiji-kun on patrol. Eiji had to cross the room and sit next to the older Inuzuka after Hana told the younger Namikaze, "He'll be back in a while," and patted the spot beside her. "When is he going to return? Would he be willing to spar later, in your opinion?" "I'm sure he will," Hana said, laughing at his ruffled hair. "Don't you feel exhausted already?" she inquired, but the blonde boy gave her a disapproving shake of his head. "Nope, I'm too energetic." Before a combative expression came to his face, Eiji replied, "I don't feel tired at all. Do you want to spar, Hana?" At the challenge, Hana couldn't help but smile ferally, thinking that since she was a Jonin, she might be able to make him laugh a little. "All right, Gaki, I'm game." However, she cautioned, "If I beat you up too badly, don't go crying to your brother. The opposite will occur." Before the two hurried outside to begin their spar, Eiji shot back, "I'm going to send you crying back to Enko-ne-chan." They all watched him go, and they saw Haku follow. "I better make sure she doesn't go overboard," Hayate muttered, patting his chest, grateful that he hadn't had another coughing fit. "Where are you heading to?" Kakashi asked, glancing at the girl with the black hair. She said, "To watch them," and then walked out of the room, trailing Eiji and Hana. "Naruto is back." As she fell backwards and landed on top of an equally breathless Naruto, with her hand running through his blonde hair, Kurotsuchi mumbled, breathing heavily, "That was fantastic." Their legs were tangled together, and Naruto's arm lay spread out through the cool grass, their bodies covered in sweat as their lovemaking finally came to an end. He smiled and started massaging her side, saying, "Yeah, it was. Your endurance has improved. This time, you managed to stay up with me." She smiled back at him after he gave her an elbow to the ribs, saying, "That Uzumaki stamina you're all known for won't defeat me." She laughed when she saw her father get a little flushed. "I'm sure your mother keeps your father on his toes in the bedroom. Please don't bring that up ever again. I really don't need to think about my parents acting in that way." Their clothes were all over the place, though Kurotsuchi's bra had somehow found its way into the trees. The two sat there for a good 5 minutes, enjoying the afterglow of sex, just staring up between the trees while Naruto kept his arms around her and kept her close to him. "I should leave now." She sat up and left her lover's embrace, remarking on how cold it was without his skin touching hers. "If I stay any longer, my squad will be wondering where I am," she muttered. But she felt him quickly come up behind her, put his arms around her waist again, and pull her back to his chest. Before lowering his head onto her shoulder, he whispered into her ear, "I hate all this sneaking around." He heard her sigh and felt her nod her head in agreement. "I understand. I also detest it. The distance between our two villages doesn't help either. I hate not being able to see you every day," Kurotsuchi retorted, "and that's on top of how much they hate each other. Each of us has a specific responsibility to our villages. Our families, too. I wish life could be so much easier, Kami. When do you think we can see each other next?" "So do I." The two stood and gazed at each other, pressing their foreheads together, closing their eyes, and relishing each other's company. "I'm not sure." Naruto informed her, "I am aware that this year's Chunin exam will be held in Konoha. Do you believe your grandfather will release a team?" "I'm not really sure. I've described him to you. How obstinate he can be," she retorted. They were silent as they briefly separated to re-dress. Neither of them felt the chill of the cold air on their bodies. After they had re-dressed, they turned to face each other and clasped hands. "I'll miss you. I will also miss you." Even though it would be challenging, Naruto wanted to make as much time as possible for them to be together without prying eyes, so he asked her if she would be in Konoha. "Promise you will write and let me know what your grandfather decided about the Chunin exams." "How do I know you're not just using me to gain intel on my village?" she asked, nodding before a sly grin came to her face and she put a finger under his chin. Before the two met for a final kiss, their arms encircling each other tightly, Naruto smirked back and asked, "How do I know you're not just using me for the same?" Both of them relished the final kiss they would probably share for a while. Naruto remained motionless as Kurotsuchi winked at him slyly before she took off, leaping up into the trees and hopping along the dense branches before swiftly vanishing after a full minute of connection. Sensing Kurotsuchi's chakra signature, Naruto remained motionless for a few minutes before turning around and returning to the bridge builder's house. The last thing he wanted was for Hana to smell a woman's scent all over him, something he knew she would probably detect, so he needed a long shower. A few days later, as he, Hana, Hayate, and Team 7 entered the southern gate of Konoha through the big red doors, Naruto muttered, "Home sweet home." He turned to face the gate guards and said, "My squad and Team 7 have returned from our respective missions." With a confirmed nod from the blonde, they said, "Thank you Naruto-san. The Hokage already told us of your expected arrival earlier. Head on straight to the Hokage building." Naruto turned to face Team 7 and his teammates after responding, "Will do. Thanks. Glad to be back home Eiji." Eiji acknowledged that he missed his comfortable bed more than anything else. "Yeah, definitely. Wave was cool and all, but I'm just glad to be home. I just want to go home and go to bed." He couldn't help but feel some of the tension and anxiety he had been carrying since the mission started gradually subside when he saw his home. It wasn't until he got home that he was able to unwind, knowing that it was over. His tone made Hana glare at him in annoyance, realizing what he was talking about. "Yeah, I know what you mean. There's nothing better in the world than home. What about you, Hana? Chan? You glad to home?" Or, perhaps more accurately, who she was excited to see now that she was at home. "Don't make me bite and scratch you," he whispered. "Shouldn't you be saving that for the bedroom?" But Hana heard him and growled from her chest, which only made him laugh. Eiji stared at them bewildered. "What are you talking about? Don't worry. You'll understand in a few years." As they started walking in the direction of the Hokage building, Eiji sulked at his older brother. However, a dust cloud started hurtling straight at them and showed no signs of slowing down, forcing them to stop before they could go too far. Squinting their eyes, they all noticed two human shapes directly in front of the dust cloud, which must have been the source of the disturbance. There were many moans as everyone in the street was knocked out of the way. Naruto gasped when he saw that one had dark hair and the other had red hair, which he recognized. Sasuke and Eiji both saw it right away and had terrified expressions on their faces. Their mother's opinions of their C-ranked mission that became an A-ranked one were completely forgotten. As Kushina and Makoto rushed into their youngest sons, Hana, Sakura, Hayate, and Kakashi all moved aside to watch. Somehow, they managed to stay upright and pulled the two in for a tight, lung-crushing embrace. As they were being crushed, the two boys, who were looking a little blue, tried to talk. While Sasuke was receiving something similar from Makoto, Kushina continued to babble, "Oh Eiji-kun, you have no idea how worried I've been. Are you hurt? Do I need to take you to see Tsunade?" Despite both boys' best efforts to break free from their mother's hold, they were only able to tighten their hold. "Tell me what happened." As Kushina finally started to relax, Eiji was able to say, "I'm fine Chan. I'm not hurt." Then he felt the air return. "The mission was a success. We kicked some serious ninja butt. You should have seen us." However, Kushina's expression changed from one of relief to one of consternation. As he grabbed Kakashi's shirt collar, Kushina hissed, "Eiji Namikaze, you have no idea how much trouble you're in. You too, Kakashi. Don't think I can't see you trying to sneak off. I've already dealt with Minato, who has spent the last week sleeping on the couch. However, you will be getting something much worse." The masked ninja squeaked out, "But I was just following orders." Kushina was obviously not amused. Makoto, who now had the same expression as her friend, also grabbed Kakashi's collar with her other hand and held onto her son's collar now that he was free. Soon after, the two mothers turned around and started pulling the three male Team 7 members in the direction of the Hokage building. Kushina shouted, "Naruto, get moving," while keeping her oldest in mind. Makoto yelled, "Do not try to leave without our permission." With his hands in his pockets, Naruto silently and slowly followed the two mothers after giving them a dejected look. Ignoring the groaning of the civilians still on the ground, he complained, "What did I do wrong?" Sakura immediately obeyed and fled when Hayate whispered to her, "I think this is where you should run home before they try to punish you too." She didn't want to be punished by the insane mothers of her teammates. A familiar scent hit her nose as Hana, who was grinning at the sight of the devoted mothers treating their sons like infants, felt a tap on her shoulder. She barely shifted her head to the right before her lips met someone else's. She felt a pair of arms wrap around her waist as she melted into the kiss. Anko tried to keep their lips together while whispering, "You have no idea how much I've missed you." "I know what you mean. Let's go home. We're taking a long hot shower." "We're?" Anko asked, smiling, and Hana gave her a sly glance before the two girls hurried off. Hayate was the only one left when it was out of sight, and he was beginning to feel a little excluded because no one had come to welcome him. He didn't give it much thought before heading toward his own house, considering going to Yugo if she was interested. Mito Namikaze wasn't exactly content, not at all. Since they had all eaten Ichiraku ramen the day before, Minato suggested that her family spend the evening at the Akamichi barbecue. After Eiji's alleged C-ranked mission was transformed into an A-ranked mission and she faced off against a world-renowned shinobi and his apprentice, it had been 2 days since her siblings had returned from Wave Country. For several days, she had observed her mother walking around their house in anticipation of hearing that her youngest son had returned to the village and had a shadow clone watching over all 4 gates. The 2 family matriarchs had not been the most agreeable of women to be around, and Makoto Uchiha had joined her by that point. They were still worried even after Minato told them that Team 7 had made it to Wave safely after surviving a confrontation with Zabuza Momochi. They were relieved to learn that Naruto, Yugo, and Hayate had also left, but their concerns persisted. They were up against a shinobi of a ranked quality, and their youngest son had only been genin for 3 months. Because her parents didn't need any more issues, Mito tried to hide her feelings of envy while worrying about her twin brother. On the couch, her poor father was already dozing off. Furthermore, Kushina had been closely monitoring Eiji ever since he returned home to make sure the mission had not left any negative effects. She wanted to know what had transpired during that mission. Makoto had been no different. Makoto would not allow Sasuke to leave the clan compound or her site, except for team meetings and training, no matter what he said. The boy found it annoying and attempted to correct his mother, which resulted in a protracted argument between the two of them. Since he and Shizuka could hear them from the Uchiha training grounds, Itachi eventually had to intervene. After calming Makoto, he sent Sasuke to his room and put seals around it to prevent him from trying to leave for training sessions at midnight. With Sasuke avoiding Makoto, the mother and youngest son were not getting along at the moment. However, Mito couldn't help but reflect on how fortunate they were to have gone through a mission like that. Fighting off strong shinobi and rescuing a whole nation? It resembled a scene from a fairy tale. To say she was envious would be an understatement. As Mito bit into a piece of her barbecue ribs, tearing the meat straight off the bone and disregarding the mess it was creating around her mouth, she chortled, "It's still not fair. Eiji got to go on one. Why can't I?" Minato moaned as he savored his meal, desperate to forget about the unpleasant memories of the Wave mission. The previous evening, Kushina had just returned him to their room. Since the couch was bad for his back, he really didn't want to get back on it. Since he didn't want people to start referring to him as elderly, he would never acknowledge it. "Mito, you know why. It was a mistake on my part and Kakashi's. I should have delved deeper into Tazuna-san's request and I definitely shouldn't have allowed Team 7 to continue with the mission. It was a mistake on my part and it's a mistake I hope to never make again." Minato stated that Kushina gave him and a nod was given. As she used a napkin to wipe Mina's face, Kushina reminded her, "A mistake that could have gotten your brother killed, Mito." The 10-year-old gave her a frustrated look. She was no longer 5. If it wasn't for Naruto being on the delivery mission to Kiri and getting to Wave, then the mission could have taken a very bad turn, one that results in someone's death. "But you'll be with us, Ka-chan, and you're even stronger than Kakashi," said Mito. "Which means it's even more unlikely that anything will happen to us." As Minato bowed his head in shame and the atmosphere grew gloomy, Kushina explained, "It doesn't matter who goes with you or how strong one person might be. A mission can go wrong at any point in time. This has been a learning curve for both your father and I, though mostly your father." "I said I was sorry already. Sorry doesn't change what happened, girly man." As Kushina ignored her husband and concentrated on her oldest daughter, the gloomy atmosphere grew worse. "We will take a C-ranked mission in time since I feel the team has built up enough to do so, but any chance of a mission ranked higher is a long way off. I'm not letting you or Eiji go on to anything higher than a C rank until you're both at least a Chunin." Mito attempted to reason, but Kushina interrupted him right away, saying, but that's not fair." With her face puffed up like a squirrel with too much food in its mouth, Mito turned to her silent older brother sitting next to her and said, "Mito, this is the end of this discussion. You know our feelings about this and I will not hear any more of it." While enjoying his dinner, Naruto had been listening in on the majority of the conversation, waiting to speak until someone else did. He didn't want to join his father, younger brother, and Kakashi, who were already at odds with Kushina. "Oni-chan, you think I'm ready, right?" Before speaking, Naruto finished the piece of meat in his mouth and noticed, out of the corner of his mother's eye, that she had also turned to face him, waiting for him to respond. He caught their waitress' attention by saying, I want a second helping. Oh miss," and ignored her sister's irritated glances as he placed another order. She started shaking him when he felt her hands on his arms. "Oni-chan, don't avoid the question. Yes, Naruto, don't avoid the question." "Why me?" After completing his order, he turned back to them and thought, "I should have accepted Yugo's offer to train." Mito, I don't think you're ready, so you should stop asking. What? Why? Because like Chan said, you are not ready for it. You're nowhere near ready for a mission of that caliber yet. And Eiji was. Eiji said, what about me? After seeing his twin's flushed face after using the restroom. Oh, the wave mission. It's not fair. Eiji made his twin even more angry by smugly saying, you're just jealous I got to Rasengan someone and win a battle. Minato glared at her as Mito attempted to punch him but was stopped by Naruto's hand. When his kids were out to dinner, he wasn't going to let them fight. Naruto gently turned her head to face him after bringing her fist back and placing it on the table. Eiji made a mistake. His intentions were good, yes, but he didn't think it all the way through. Naruto stated to her. He should have thought about the consequences of continuing on with the mission and should have come straight back to the Leaf Village. We're lucky that he wasn't hurt or far worse. You should just be happy that he came home safe and not envious of him. But you were there to save him. Only by chance. If I wasn't there with Hana and Hayate, then who knows what could have happened. If you want to go on a higher class mission so bad, then focus on your training. Go on the missions that you're given and be patient. Good things come to those who wait. Naruto stated this while his parents nodded in acceptance. Besides, would you want scrub the house from top to bottom like Eiji has had to do in the last few days? Eiji shivered and Mito shook her head. Kushina's punishments had not been gentle. Would you like to get placed on guard duty for a month like Kakashi? After shaking her head once more, Mito started to understand the message. Do you understand me, Mito? Mito muttered, I guess so. Then she felt Naruto hit her forehead, causing a tiny smile to spread across her face. Before the family of 6 returned to their meals in a relaxed silence, their parents smiled at the small action as well. When Naruto's second assistant finally showed up, he thanked the waitress, who appeared a little flushed and agitated, before running away, a move that Kushina did not miss. It reminded her of the brief chat she had with Naruto prior to his departure for Water Country. Kushina wiggled her eyebrows and said, you know, Naruto, that waitress has been smiling at you the entire time we've been here. She ignored his father's laughter and his mother's pout, and her son's only response was a moan before beginning his next meal. The following day, with a startled expression on her face, Mebuki Haruno said, Naruto-san, what an honor this is. What can I help you with? It was a rare treat for the blonde Haruno to be able to speak with a member of Konoha's well-known family, and she was not prepared for the Yondaime's eldest son to knock on her front door at 9 in the morning of all days. Sakura Haruno's parents were both shinobi, just like their daughter, who was a Chunin. The level they had attained and the lifestyle it provided were sufficient to satisfy both of them. During his patrol on the outer walls of Konoha, Naruto had met the family patriarch, Kazashi Haruno, a few times before. He found the man to be amiable. He could see the source of their daughter's pink hair. Naruto, dressed in his regular outfit of a black pair of pants, sandals, and a simple blue long-sleeve shirt, bowed to the woman. His forehead protector was hidden in his pocket, and his swords were sealed on his arms as usual. I'm sorry for disturbing you, Haruno-san, but I was hoping I could speak with Sakura. I have something I would like to speak with her about. Mebuki nodded despite looking surprised. Of course. She's still asleep right now, but I'll go wake up. Please excuse me for a moment, Naruto-san. As Naruto waited calmly, he heard a commotion from the top of the stairs, which seemed to indicate that Sakura was overjoyed to be awakened. Before he could hear hurried footsteps and cabinets being opened, Mebuki mentioned Naruto's names, ending the brief argument. After a brief moment, Mebuki walked down with a slight irritated expression before smiling again as her gaze met Naruto's. She'll be down in a few minutes, Naruto-san. Thank you, Haruno-san. I appreciate it. 5 minutes after she said that, a rumpled Sakura, still in the process of putting on her ninja sandals, bounded down the stairs. She pulled a hairbrush from the cabinet next to the door and straightened her hair, stopping directly in front of Naruto. As she glanced at Eiji and Mito's older brother, who merely stood there and waited for her to finish, she appeared anxious. Before returning to her breakfast, she saw her mother shaking her head from the adjacent room. Hello, Naruto-san. What are you doing here? Sakura asked humbly after swallowing and setting down the hairbrush. Before he started to leave, Naruto replied, I wanted to speak with you. Come with me. There's somewhere I want to take you. Sakura remained stunned for a moment before bidding her mother farewell and leaving her house. She jogged over to Naruto, took a seat next to him, and began to walk at his speed. For 5 minutes, they were silent as they moved through the middle of the village, ignoring the people and market vendors who were occupying the streets. Sakura made an effort to avoid glancing at the clothing displayed at several market stalls, as some of the items caught her attention and she had noted them to check the prices later. She was already considering whether Sasuke would approve of her wearing those clothes. As if inviting her to speak first, she noticed that Naruto was merely focusing on the path ahead of them and not acknowledging her when she looked up at him. She decided to take the first step after biting her lip. Sakura halted when Naruto stopped and turned to face her, asking, "So what did you want to talk about, Naruto-san?" There weren't many people around, and they were now on the edge of the market. She didn't recognize any of the shinobi, but there were a few. Sakura looked puzzled before nodding her head in agreement as Naruto said, "Sakura, I'm going to ask you a question and I want you to answer me as honestly as you can. Why do you want to be a shinobi?" Sakura was taken aback by the question, but she responded right away without giving it any thought. Her hands went to her mouth in surprise as she responded, "Because my parents are shinobi and I want Sasuke to like me." She had repeatedly told herself that she didn't consider what other people might think of her reasoning because of this. She took a step back in shock as Naruto told her bluntly, "If that is really your reason to want to be a kunoichi, then you should give up and drop out of the ninja program. The reason you just gave me is an insult to kunoichi everywhere in the world. Do you think being a shinobi is a game?" She shook her head nervously. "That's right, and right now you're making a mock out of it. It's reasons like this that end up getting people killed. Not only yourself but the people around you. Do you want the guilty conscience of knowing you got your teammates killed because of what a dead weight you were?" She nodded. "Not only are you doing yourself a disservice, but you're making a mockery of the very shinobi that protect you and everyone in the village." Naruto could see his words were having an impact on the younger girl as he looked down at her. Even though he felt terrible about what he was saying to her, he knew it had to be said because her eyes were starting to sparkle. She had to see reality and wake up. "Sakura, what I saw in Wave was completely and utterly disappointing. I had thought more of you and yet you let me down big time. Your skills are nowhere near the level of a genin, and if anything I think you should be sent back to the academy. The academy's 3 basic jutsu are not going to get you very far in this world." Sakura was escorted to a nearby bench and seated by him. Her hands were clenched tightly in her hands, and by this point, the tears had escaped and were streaming down her face. Naruto was hurt to see someone like that, and he could hear her sobbing. As Sakura's tearful face looked up at him, he said, "Sakura, look at me. I know how much you like Sasuke. Heck, I've heard Mito and Eiji go on about it in annoyance. Plus I have known Sasuke since he was a toddler. I know this hurts, but since I imagine that he your first crush, right?" Sakura raised her eyebrows. "Sasuke has a lot of issues that go very deep. His issues with his clan and his brother have made him hateful and unkind. He's a good-looking boy, sure, but as he is not good for you. This fixation you have for him needs to stop, and you need to start focusing on the real world and not the one you have created in your head." A reassuring hand rested on Sakura's shoulder as she sobbed and her eyes met Naruto's blue ones. "But I really like him." He wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled warmly at her, saying, "I know, and maybe in the future Sasuke may change and finally begin letting people in. But until then I think you need to let him go. Be his friend by all means, but don't expect anything to come of it. For now you need to let him go and focus on you. Can you do that for me?" They sat in silence for 5 minutes while he watched Sakura reflect deeply. He let her think for a while, watching her eyes flicker as her mind raced with thousands of ideas. For a young person like Sakura, giving up on her beliefs was difficult. However, Naruto and the others were aware that continuing in this direction was unhealthy for her. Sakura's early death was not something anyone wanted to witness. "I can try, Naruto-san." A small smile spread across the pink-haired girl's face as he patted her shoulder and replied, "That's all I can ask for, Sakura-chan." Once more, Naruto sat back and waited for Sakura to respond to his question. "Now if I ask you again, why do you want to be a shinobi?" It was a good thing that the girl was so eager to prove herself to her peers. More than anything, Naruto and her Jonin sensei Kakashi wished to instill in her a strong sense of resolve. She could succeed as a kunoichi if she didn't constantly think about Sasuke. Sakura gripped her dress tightly and whispered, "Naruto-san, I know what I want." Naruto leaned in to listen to her response. Sakura observed Naruto's face and felt a tiny sense of relief when he smiled warmly at her. "I want to make my parents proud and show everyone I can be a great kunoichi. That's why I want to be a shinobi." Naruto got up and said, "Better, Sakura. Much better." Sakura followed suit. She wiped her eyes and made an effort to look more put together. "Now since your resolve to being a kunoichi is stronger, I think we talk about your skills and strength and how we go about improving them." "How do I do that? Kakashi-sensei is still on guard duty for another 3 weeks." Sakura inquired. If she wanted to train, she didn't know who to ask. Sasuke was training alone at the Uchiha compound. Kakashi was still receiving punishment. And Eiji had persuaded his mother to allow him to train with Mito and their group. She was unsure of where to go. On most days, even her parents were occupied. Naruto told her, "Well, that problem I am about to solve for you. Let's keep walking." The two then started walking again. Sakura watched as Naruto greeted some of the public and some of their fellow Leaf Shinobi, looking interested in where they were going. He was clearly well liked in the village, but she had no idea how much until now. She was starting to understand why Eiji and Mito frequently discussed him. Sakura soon saw Naruto guiding them directly to Konoha Hospital after seeing it emerge in the distance. Sakura said, "We're going to the hospital? Is someone sick?" He saw her looking perplexed and said, "Everyone's fine, but this is where your training is going to begin. Tell me, Sakura, have you ever thought about being a medic? Nin?" She gave a headshake. They approached the building, and Naruto pushed the door open, holding it open for the young girl before he started guiding her up one of the stairs while nodding to the nurses behind the reception desk. "I've never given it much thought, Naruto-san. Well, Sakura, let me tell you about a medical nin in case you were unaware what their role is. Medical ninja are ninja who specialize in medical treatment and use of medical-oriented techniques to heal others and accompany other ninja on high-ranking missions to increase the success rate of the mission and overall survival rate of the squad. A medical nin is trained to avoid getting injured in any way, for the reason that if they are injured, then there would be nobody to heal the other members of their team." Sakura listened intently, and a smile started to spread across her face. Sakura thought that medic ninjas were vital to the village and that it was not a career that everyone was suited for based on Naruto's explanation of their duties. Sakura found herself intrigued and even a little excited, even though it sounded like a difficult kind of shinobi to become. "You think I could be a good medical ninja, Naruto-san? I do, as does Kakashi. I spoke with him about it and he has actually been thinking the same thing lately. Having you as a medical nin would great strengthen the team and would help you individually a great deal. Should Eiji or Sasuke or even Kakashi get injured, it will be up to you to patch them up. Not only will you be learning about medical ninjutsu, but as a medic nin your durability and chakra reserves will need to be increased. So expect a lot of physical exercise and taijutsu training to come along." After walking down a lengthy hallway to the floor Naruto desired, Sakura merely nodded. There was some light chatter coming from different patient rooms as the doctors and nurses went about their daily business. They came to a stop at an office halfway down the hall, and Sakura saw Naruto knock on the door. She heard Naruto push the door open and say, "Come in." Naruto said, "Hi Chan." Shizune got up from her chair, hugged the blonde, kissed the side of his head, and expressed gratitude that someone had come to take her mind off of all the paperwork she needed to do. Or perhaps she should mention Tsunade's paperwork, which she had failed to begin or complete. Shizune's gaze shifted to the girl with the pink hair who was standing there clumsily, not knowing what to do. "Is this her?" "It is." Shizune meets Sakura Haruno, member of Team 7 and Genin of Konoha. Naruto began. "Sakura, this is Shizune Kato, Jonin of Konoha, disciple of Lady Tsunade of the Sanin and one of the best medic nins in Konoha." Sakura bowed to the elderly woman and couldn't help but feel anxious as she said, "It's nice to meet you, Shizune-san." Since Tsunade was one of the strongest kunoichi in the world, if not the strongest, she was well aware of who she was. Sakura reasoned that Shizune must have been extremely strong if she had been her pupil. As she greeted Sakura, Shizune acknowledged, "The same to you, Sakura. Naruto came to me yesterday and asked if I wouldn't mind seeing if you had the right mindset and skill proficiency to become a medic nin. Now before we do anything I will inform you I am a busy person and I don't get a lot of free time. However, if you prove to me today that you will train hard and work constantly at joining the medical corps, then I will be more than happy to take an hour or two out of my days to help you." Sakura put her hands to her chest as her face brightened with joy. Shizune smiled and patiently held her hands in front of her, saying, "That would be wonderful, Shizune-san. I promise I will try my hardest." That's all I ask for, Sakura. The medical corps of Konoha are always ready to take on more men and women like yourself into the healing arts. The more we have, then the better chance our shinobi will come home alive. Shizune glanced at Naruto. "I can take it from here, Naruto. I hope you remember our deal." Naruto let out a sigh. "I know. Your morning coffee and pastries every morning for the next month." "Very good. Now off with you. I'm about to start my rounds in 10 minutes, which Sakura will help me with and observe. Go on now, off you go." As he waved Sakura off, Naruto said, Okay, I'm going. Good luck, Sakura. Don't let Chan work you too hard." Before Naruto left the room, Sakura thanked him and said, "I'll try, Naruto-san. Thank you for everything." She turned to Shizune and sat down in the spot that Shizune was indicating. Shizune pulled out a pen and a blank sheet of paper as they sat down and started talking. Alright, Sakura. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what you hope to accomplish today. After a month. Is this really what we should be doing? It was a very hot day, and most people were seeking cover in their homes, swimming pools, or the shade of trees. Hana asked, turning to face Anko, who had her arms behind her head and a big smile on her face. They were leaning against a large tree, contentedly resting beneath the shade as the sun pounded down on the village. Obviously. A sight like this is not something we see every day. Let's make the most of it now. The three girls were dressed casually, with their sandals resting to one side, and Anko explained. Plus the heat just makes it even better. Hana rolled her eyes, but she didn't take her eyes off the attraction in front of her. Shizuka, on the other side of Anko, was a mixture of irritated and content. With a slightly irritated tone, Shizuka said, I don't know whether I'm okay with the two of you ogling my future husband. She never took her eyes off the sweat streaked Itachi, and both she and Hana could see the slight flush on her cheeks. Both young men were in the middle of a taijutsu spar, with Naruto on the offensive and Itachi on the defensive. Itachi had asked Naruto to keep him on his toes because he didn't want his taijutsu to slacken, and Naruto was the best person to keep him on his toes. Naruto and Itachi were currently using the training field in front of them, taking advantage of the hot day and the empty training fields. Both boys were topless, having thrown away their shirts early after being encouraged by Anko. My dear Shizuka, you can't keep Itachi all for yourself all the time, Anko said, placing her arm over Shizuka while continuing to smile. You have to occasionally give us girls a taste of him. We girls need to appreciate a body like those two already possess. I assumed you were exclusively attracted to women. Shizuka pressed, still not totally at ease with their staring. Why would you care about their bodies? Shizu-chan. No, I like both sexes, and even though my Hana makes me happier than ever, that doesn't mean I can't enjoy a well-maintained male body. Hana shook her head, knowing that Anko was starting to show signs of sexiness and playfulness, and she didn't even try to stop her from talking about their bedroom antics because it was pointless. Shizuka continued to stare at her fiancé copyright, but she would not deny that he had a very nice upper half. Besides, no offense to Itachi, as muscular and defined as he is, I think we all know Naruto wins the best body award. Anko and a grudging Hana couldn't help but stare at the muscular upper half of their blonde friend and roommate. Naruto was the more physical fighter of the two, and the results of his taijutsu and kenjutsu training were very evident. Hey, what are the three of you discussing? Naruto yelled as he kicked Itachi back and deflected a blow from him, causing him to skid back. It's your attractive upper half. The two men were not surprised when Anko yelled back, Mama likes. Come here for a moment, both of you. After Naruto and Itachi stopped fighting and approached the three girls, Shizuka threw a bottle of water to Itachi, who caught it with ease, and Hana did the same for Naruto. What is it, Anko-chan? Shizuka put her arm around Itachi's and appeared relieved that he didn't try to resist as she asked. Have you all heard about the Chunin exams that are scheduled for 2 months from now? Obviously, yes. How about it? It's all I've been hearing about at home, Naruto said, downing the water bottle. My parents are being harassed by Mito to allow her to participate. Itachi continued, Sasuke is the same with Ka-san and I. Naruto and Itachi both spat out water when she said, well, I thought you guys might like to know Hokage. Sama has asked if I would like to be the proctor of the second exam. You're kidding. I was there when he asked, Hana disclosed, but she's not. Man, do I feel sorry for the genin, Naruto said, shaking his head and feeling some sympathy for the young participant. They don't know what they're getting themselves into. At what he said, Anko licked her lips. You got that right. I intend to make this year truly memorable. I'll give it my special Anko treatment. Before the group heard someone yell, Oni-chan, Itachi muttered, that's just frightening. A couple of figures emerged from the woods and entered the training field, revealing that it was Mito in her typical shinobi attire, with Sai and Shikamaru trailing behind her at a slower pace. You were aware of their arrival? Naruto nodded as Itachi asked. What are you guys doing here? He said, gesturing them over. I felt them coming this way 10 minutes ago. Do you not have D ranks to complete? We've already completed them. Mito disclosed, then pointed resolutely at Naruto. I want a rematch, Oni-chan. Ka-chan gave us the rest of the afternoon to train on our own. I want to demonstrate to you my progress thus far. Already, however, only a few months have passed. Surely you don't think you're strong enough to beat me yet? Naruto responded, attempting to appear arrogant and powerful in an attempt to irritate his sister. He succeeded, as her face flushed and she pointed angrily at him. Shikamaru shook his head at her being provoked so readily, while Sai remained silent as usual. That's it, me and you at this moment. With one hand resting on the sword on her back, Mito yelled, waving her fist at her older brother, ready to leap him into battle. Naruto wanted to spar with his baby sister, if only to make the fight into a game of play, which he knew would make her even more irate. However, he had already promised Itachi to spar for the majority of the day, and he did get a sly gleam in his eye as a thought occurred to him. You see, I'm already too preoccupied with sparring with Itachi, Mito-chan. We Uzumakis don't break promises, don't we? With her cheeks puffed out, Mito gave him a glare as he said, but perhaps Anko-chan wouldn't mind showing you a few things if you ask politely. She doesn't have a lot going on right now. Shikamaru had a bad feeling in his stomach and sighed, and it got worse when Mito was actually thinking about it. His father had told him a little about the sadist of the interrogation unit, and he didn't seem to want to deal with someone with her kind of reputation. His friends looked like he had just swallowed a crazy pill, while Anko was beaming with joy. Anko leapt from her chair, landed on her feet, and joyfully cracked her knuckles before Mito could accept. Well, since you asked so politely, Mito said. Anko said, I think I can show them a thing or two. She then pulled up her top to show off her tight spandex shorts and sports bra underneath. Why are you wearing that under your clothes, Anko? Both Hana and Shizuka rolled their eyes as Naruto asked, placing his hand in his palm in a gesture that Itachi imitated. Shikamaru tried to look everywhere but the nearly nude woman, while Sai tried the same. Mito, however, glanced at Anko's bust before she looked down at her own. Before she felt Naruto flick her forehead, she asked herself, will I grow like that? Hey, I understand your thoughts. He patted her head as though she were a pet and told her, none of that is allowed for another 5 years at least. His sister gave him another irritated look. Before strolling toward the center of the field, Anko stretched her arms and legs and swayed her hips hypnotically, drawing Hana and Naruto's attention. I thought I would spar with you guys later, but I guess teaching the kids a thing or two can work too, Anko said. Anko winked at her girlfriend and teased, who knows, maybe Hana-chan would want to join me later in showing them how a real shinobi fights. I'm going to show you how strong I am, Anko-ne-san, Mito said, hurrying to the center of the field with her sword already drawn while the others ignored her remark. Behind her, Shikamaru and Sai cautiously entered the field while the pineapple-haired boy looked for a way out. Don't take me lightly or I'll cut you for sure. As a kunai materialized in Anko's hand, everyone heard her laugh and observed her using her long tongue to lick the metal side. How adorable. Anko said, you'll discover that I'm the one who will be doing the cutting today, Mito-chan. Mito felt a chill run down her spine, and her teammates also took a significant step back. Mito, what have you done to us? Despite the uneasy expression on his face, Naruto leaned against the tree with his arms folded. Well, this will at least prepare her for what lies ahead. Naruto leaned over the chair Shizune was seated on and asked, so how is she doing, Ne-chan? The woman was reviewing some documents that Tsunade had once again claimed she had forgotten to complete. As he gazed at Sakura, who had her hands clasped over a fish on a small table, Naruto's hand was resting beneath his head. As the fish was covered in the familiar green aura of the healing palm technique, her face was creased in concentration. Mina, don't touch that. We don't want it smashing on the ground. Mina Namikaze gazed into one of the numerous jars on the massive bookcase, which held what appeared to be a pale pinky finger. Her eyes kept returning to it even though it initially grossed her out. She called out, okay Oni-chan. Then, as usual, she skipped over and jumped into her big brother's embrace, putting her arms around his neck and using his arms to support her. Her feet swayed in the air and she giggled. Shizune tried her best to continue working on the paperwork while grinning at the exchange. Sakura's doing well. She was a bit rocky during the first week but she began adapting very well. Thankfully her chakra reserves have grown in the last 3 months and I'm proud to say is now firmly at a genin level. Her control grew as well and has one of the best chakra control I've seen for someone her age. So it was a good idea to bring her to you? A very good idea. Naruto let out a joyful sigh. I'm glad. We could all see she wanted to contribute in some way but her bad habits and mindset was really getting in the way. Though I hear she hasn't spoken much to Sasuke as of late. Acknowledged Naruto. In fact I think Mito has said Sakura has been spending more time with her, Ino and Hinata. It's a good sign. It is. The idea someone could act that way over a boy at such a young age was quite unsettling. Though from the improvements she has made I think she will go very far in this field. She's memorized everything I have told her and taught her and the patients she assists me with seem to like her. The nurses too have taken a shining to her, though her temper can sometimes get the better of her. Naruto laughed. Well, it's a good first step, and I'm sure her parents are happy that she's taking her career as a shinobi more seriously. Mina looked over at Sakura, who was still concentrating on the fish on the table, and asked, Oni-chan, what's she doing? Mina's face furrowed as she recognized the green aura surrounding her hands and realized that her brother had previously used his hands in a similar manner. Naruto saw Mina's face contort as she nodded and said, well, Mina Sakura is currently learning the healing palm technique. You remember that Shizune and Tsunade are medical shinobi, right? She glanced at Sakura and Naruto and replied, yeah, I remember Oni-chan. Well, Sakura is currently learning to be a medical shinobi like them. Instead of fighting enemies, her primary goal when she is out on missions will be to heal her friends and comrades when they get hurt. Plus, when she's not on mission, she will help out at the hospital and help Tsunade and Shizune-chan with patients. Mina got it. She said, you can do it, can't you, Oni-chan? As Naruto grinned and demonstrated the healing palm technique with his free hand. I can, though I'm not a medical shinobi like Nei-chan is. It's just something they taught me just in case I got hurt and there was no one with the skills to heal me. It's very handy to have. He acknowledged. Why do you ask, Mina-chan? Mina continued to glance between Sakura and Naruto until he noticed a shy expression on her face. Shizune put down her papers after noticing it as well. Naruto sat down next to Shizune and frowned at the face Mina was pulling. What is it, Mina? What's wrong? He asked. Both nodded their heads when she asked, can I tell you a secret? Naturally, Mina-chan. Tell me anything you want. What are you thinking about? Mina shuffled a little on Naruto's lap as he asked. I dislike fighting, Oni-chan. She told them, I don't think I want to be a shinobi like you, Eiji, Mito, Ka-san, and Tu-san. Mina expected Shizune and Naruto to look shocked, but instead they both gave her a reassuring smile and looked at her with gentle understanding. She felt Naruto's arms tighten around her and felt him kiss the side of her head. Is that all? Naruto assured Mina. I know a lot of people who are like that, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. Mina, I'm kind of like that, believe it or not. Even though I occasionally fight, I secretly detest it. That's the reason I decided to train under Lady Tsunade as a medical shinobi. As a medical shinobi, you don't have to fight at all if you don't want to, Shizune explained, adding that the idea of primarily caring for and healing other shinobi helped him find his place in the shinobi system. You have the option of being assigned to the hospital and occasionally to the Chunin exams. So I could use chakra and still be a nurse? Shizune gave a nod. Do you think you might be interested in that? I believe you would make a fantastic medical ninja, Mina, Naruto said to her. Naruto informed her, you have very steady hands and are very intelligent. Are Ka-san and Tu-san aware of these feelings? Naruto laughed when Mina shook her head. Would you like me to accompany you to tell them later? Again, she nodded her head. Mina, you should never feel embarrassed about something like this. You could never irritate or anger me, would you? Mina whispered, okay, Oni-chan. Naruto rocked them gently from side to side and the two hugged. Do you think they'll be mad? Not at all, Mina. They will probably be pleased that you want to become a medical shinobi. Eiji and Mito were constantly getting in scraps, so it's good to have someone in the family break the mold. In fact, if you learn to be a medical shinobi, then Mito and Eiji can finally have someone to nurse them back to health when they've gone and got themselves hurt. Naruto chuckled as Mina laughed. How come this is so frustrating? Fish scales and guts scattered across the table and the floor as Sakura screamed and started to wave her fist at the fish before punching it, causing Shizune to sigh and shake her head. She whispered, that's the third one this week. Then, before everyone could hear the door open and Itachi enter, he turned to face Naruto and beckoned him over. Naruto, may I talk to you for a second? Itachi's question startled Naruto, but he nodded that it was okay and stood up, placing Mina on the seat beside Shizune. Mina, I'm going to go speak with Itachi for a bit. You can learn more about being a medical shinobi from Shizune-chan. I'll be back soon. He told her and got a nod from Mina before Mina and Shizune began to converse. He left the room following Itachi out before both stopped in the hallway. Itachi looked pretty serious and crossed his arms as his black eyes met with his violet ones. What's this about Itachi? Sasuke's attitude has persisted for too long, in my opinion. To prevent him from continuing on the path he has chosen, it's time for some tough love. Naruto snorted. Don't you think it's about time? Naruto didn't want to see their family fall apart because Sasuke's hatred was starting to take over his life. The boy was too conceited and haughty for his own good. I've always said that you and Sensei were too lenient toward him, He saw his friend sigh, and Naruto could tell Itachi had finally realized what needed to be done. I understand, which is why I need your assistance. My mother nearly broke down in tears after he and she got into another argument. Naruto listened intently as Itachi explained, I'm done with this attitude. If it was for Itachi's brat brother, he was all for a good ass whooping. Afternoon. Uchiha compound. Sasuke Uchiha, wearing his typical blue top and white shorts, had a bead of sweat running down his forehead and his knuckles were red raw from how hard he was punching his target, but he forced himself through the pain in order to help reach his goal. The sound of fists hitting a wooden post echoed through the Uchiha compound training ground as he slammed his clenched fist against the hard wood. His need to prove himself to everyone had only grown stronger over the past few years, and it was evident in his performance at the academy and with his team. He was irritated that he was made to stay at the academy until he was 13 years old because he felt more than ready to be placed on active duty a year earlier, and the only reason it was never permitted was because of the Hokage and his family. Since that night, when his father and many of his clansmen had been killed, all he had felt was this churji in his stomach. The fact that he was aware that his brother and his brother's best friend were primarily to blame for the massacre of his father and his clan didn't help either. He couldn't comprehend how people could just accept it and move on with their lives, and he was incensed about the fact that their family had never been held accountable for their crimes. He was not Itachi or his friend Naruto. He had heard rumors going around the village that people were comparing him to them, and it made him very angry. He was Sasuke Uchiha, the youngest son of Fugaku Uchiha, the man who would one day defeat his brother to become the leader of the Uchiha clan, and he would restore prosperity to his family. Sasuke heard Naruto say, "You know there's not much point in punching a target that doesn't move or tries to fight back." He turned around and narrowed his eyes when he saw Naruto standing 10 meters away from him, wearing his regular clothes instead of his shinobi uniform, with his hands in his pockets and his normally composed face. Before he addressed the blonde Jonin, Sasuke thought, "He's fast. I didn't even sense him. What do you want? Itachi isn't present." Naruto answered, "I understand. I'm not here to see Itachi. I've come to visit you." Before turning around, Sasuke held his head high and said, "I'm busy. Go bother someone else." Well, that's unfortunate. When Naruto saw Sasuke's body stop in the middle of a turn, he smiled and said, "I was quite impressed with what I saw from you on the bridge back in Wave. Here, I thought you would like to have a spar with me. You now possess your Sharingan, and civilians have informed me that you have gained some notoriety lately. For someone who has only been a genin for 6 months, it's impressive." Naruto's response elicited the desired response, and he noticed a tiny smirk on the Uchiha's face, which revealed a very smug expression. "My name is Uchiha. Are you expecting less?" "It's true. Uchihas are really scary. That is demonstrated by Itachi, and I am aware of the monstrous nature of the man when he is engaged in combat. What say you?" He watched the gears in Sasuke's head slowly turn. Sasuke saw this as the ideal opportunity to see how far he had come. Whether he wanted to admit it or not, the man in front of him was very powerful, so it was a great way to see how far he had come in the last 6 months. At least in his mind, Itachi was the only person who could do it for him. He had seen the match against the Sandaime, and it had given him a rush of excitement. "All right, but I won't be kind to you. When it comes to fighting, a Uchiha never backs down. Only a Uchiha can defeat another Uchiha, as everyone knows." "Really? That's funny, though, because I've defeated Itachi several times. How would you describe that?" Naruto inquired, and a furious expression appeared on Sasuke's face, clearly offended by that insignificant remark. Sasuke snarled as he assumed the traditional Uchiha interceptor stance, which Naruto was all too familiar with. It was nothing but luck. Sasuke waited for Naruto to change into his own stance, but he remained in it, his hands still in his pockets. "Get in your stance so we can begin." Naruto smiled back at him, saying, "No need." Sasuke's blood boiled at the words. "I'm confident I can hold my own as I am." He would not be treated with such contempt, and he felt his nails start to dig into his own palms. "All right, dress up." Before launching a volley of kunai at his opponent, Sasuke yelled. When all the kunai were released, he rushed forward. It was similar to the first time he thought of Kakashi and the casual way the copy ninja had treated him the first time they fought, and he watched in surprise as Naruto very subtly moved his legs, shoulder, and neck around just enough, and all of his kunai went right past him without even scratching him or catching a piece of his clothing. Before Sasuke could turn around and try with his other fist, he felt his body swing in the air and be launched towards the ground. Sasuke jumped into the air and attempted to land a blow on Naruto's face, but Naruto quickly blocked it with one of his hands. Sasuke thought he didn't stop and then swung his right leg down as he twisted his body in the air, but Naruto blocked it again by bringing his elbow up and preventing his leg from going any farther. When Sasuke regained his composure after he skidded on the ground and realized that Naruto had hardly moved, he narrowed his eyes and hurried through a few hand signals before yelling, "Fire style! Fireball jutsu!" The fire came directly at Naruto, and he saw as it consumed him entirely along with the earth that was lying around him. If it weren't for the voice behind him, Sasuke would have grinned. Not bad. He turned around, but as he did, a powerful foot struck his stomach, causing him to skid across the floor and clasp his stomach as the wind knocked the wind out of him. After a minute of struggling to catch his breath, he shakily managed to stand up. "Are you prepared to continue? I believed we were only beginning." "His speed is off the charts," Naruto said, smiling again as he saw Sasuke activate his Sharingan, a glare on his face as he attempted to burn Naruto alive with it. He rushed forward once more but immediately stopped and fell to the ground when Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him. Sasuke appeared a few meters away on his left and saw Naruto rushing hand signs once more after he slammed his fist into his stomach and the Uchiha used the substitute jutsu. Phoenix Flower Jutsu Fire Saintly. Multiple flower shapes fireballs flew towards Naruto only for Sasuke to watch as Naruto did the impossible in his eyes and extinguish them with simple punches. His hands smoked slightly but he saw no pain register on the blonde's face. He saw a look of anger change on Sasuke's face as he brought up Itachi once more. Itachi's version of that jutsu is at least 5 times more powerful and far more widespread. You should really learn to master your jutsu before beginning to learn more. "Stop comparing me to Itachi," Sasuke yelled as ninja wire materialized in his hand. Naruto watched as Sasuke wrapped firm ninja wire around Naruto's body while running at his maximum speed, which, Naruto had to concede, wasn't bad and was most likely low Chunin level at best. Naruto pushed off into the air after Sasuke's feet touched his shoulders. Before hurling it directly in front of Naruto, a kunai with an explosive tag materialized in his hand. Before the explosion could even occur, Sasuke's Sharingan gazed down at the captured Naruto and watched in shock as chakra encircled Naruto's hands before swiftly slicing through the ninja wire like a hot knife through butter. Then, as though to make fun of Sasuke, he stepped on the exploding tag on the kunai and used a sudden burst of chakra to deactivate it. As Sasuke hit the ground, Naruto acknowledged, "Your speed isn't bad." Sasuke appeared perplexed, but before he could respond, a hissing noise came from beneath him. "But you should be mindful of your surroundings and not focus so heavily on one person in such a big field." When he saw a live exploding tag below, he looked down in panic and leapt as quickly as he could. Sasuke was pushed farther through the air and slammed hard into the ground by the shock wave's force as the tag exploded. Naruto appeared directly above Sasuke, bringing his right foot down on top of him before he could do anything. Sasuke barely escaped and rolled aside as Naruto's foot struck the ground, leaving a tiny crater in the ground. "Why are you running? Itachi never runs away from a fight." Sasuke's whole body trembled with rage as his Sharingan swung wildly in his eyes, causing his anger to flare up once more. "Why doesn't he seem to be interested in me? Does he believe he is superior to me?" He hurried Naruto and, without hesitation, took a kunai from his pouch and started swiping wildly at his opponent, saying, "You are not better than me. I will not be looked down on by the likes of you." Naruto just sidestepped each and every swipe, much to Sasuke's utter annoyance. Sasuke let his frustration and rage out for a good minute during that time. He was astounded by this man's strength because none of his attacks were effective. Against him, even his Sharingan was of no use. Naruto finally had enough of Sasuke's slack fighting and decided to call it quits. He caught Sasuke's wrist in the middle of his swipe, then broke it with a single motion, sending Sasuke to the ground with a loud snap that echoed throughout the field. He collapsed to his knees in agony, but before he could yell at Naruto, the blonde struck him in the face with a forceful knee, shattering his nose and sending Sasuke flat on his back. Before he felt a firm foot land on his foot, Sasuke used his good arm to hold his nose. Above him, Naruto shook his head in disappointment, his face displaying disgust and annoyance. "I honestly expected better from you. Even Eiji on his own could give me a better effort than what you gave me. Don't put me in the same class as him. I'm stronger than that idiot." "Do you know why I'm here beating you into the ground?" replied Naruto. Sasuke would have snorted, but he was afraid it would make his already painful nose worse. It was already crooked from knee to face at an amusing angle. Naruto shook his head, but Sasuke sneered, "Because you think you better than me?" As more weight was placed against his chest, the weight of the foot on his chest increased. Naruto saw Sasuke's expression change from one of hatred to one of total bewilderment as he said, "No, you little fool. I'm doing this because Itachi asked me." He watched Naruto turn his head and glance to their left, and to Sasuke's surprise, he saw Itachi standing a few meters away from them, his face expressionless. Itachi's emotionless gaze gazed down at Sasuke as he started to approach them. Sasuke heard Itachi say, "You can take your foot of him now, Naruto. I think you have roughed him up enough." He then watched as Naruto lifted his foot off the ground and nodded his head. Two older boys stood above Sasuke, both of them staring down at him impassively, but Sasuke remained motionless. With an angry gaze fixed on Itachi, Sasuke questioned, "Why? Why did you have him do this to me?" The gaze had no effect on Itachi. "It's simple. This attitude you have carried with you for the last few years stops today, and it's time you started to grow up," Itachi replied to him. Sasuke attempted to get to his feet but was met with Itachi shaking his head. "I have this attitude because of what you did to our family. Why you killed our father." This time, Sasuke snorted, but he regretted it as pain shot through his nose. "Do you know why I'm as strong as I am today, Sasuke? Do you know why I have got the level 1 I'm currently at? Because you're a prodigy and your mother's precious eldest." Naruto yelled, "Hey," at him. "Show your mother the respect she rightfully deserves. You should feel lucky, Mikoto. Sensei is your mother. Many would kill to have a woman like her as their parent. You are wrong about that. It's true being a prodigy does help in becoming a strong shinobi, but it will only get you so far. I am strong today because I chose to surround myself with friends who care for me and would have my back whenever I asked it off them." As Itachi shook his head, Sasuke yelled, "Friends? Friends make you weak. We are Uchiha. We are the strongest." "That's where you are wrong again, Sasuke. Being alone doesn't make you strong. In fact, being alone will only limit and hinder your progress as a shinobi. If you continue the way you are, I can guarantee you will not reach past a certain level of strength and you will be left behind while everyone else in your generation only further expands their abilities and remain far ahead of you." Sasuke yelled back, "Lies." However, Itachi wasn't done yet. Sasuke did not respond when Naruto asked, "Do you think Eiji and Mito are as strong as they are because they did it all alone? They had our parents. They had their friends. They had their teachers. True, as of now they're only genin just like you, but in a few years. Who knows? A lot can happen in a couple of years. Do you really want to see my siblings and the friends you chose to abandon for a life of solitude to surpass you every way imaginable?" They watched Sasuke shake his head very slowly. Itachi dropped to his knees and looked at his younger brother. Sasuke attempted to turn away, but Itachi's hand gripped his chin and made him look at him. "I understand why you're angry, Sasuke. You feel betrayed with what happened that night. The way our father died. He was so focused on my training and you felt like he didn't pay enough attention to you. That I took him away from you at a time where he was finally beginning to show interest in your development. He was the one who taught you the fireball jutsu, right?" Sasuke gave a nod. He saw Sasuke's eyebrows suddenly raise in surprise, but he wasn't entirely sure what he meant when he said, "A lot happened that night, Sasuke. I see now that perhaps it wasn't a good idea to keep you the truth of why it happened away from you. I requested that Naruto beat you in this manner because I wanted you to understand that, despite being Uchiha, we are not unbeatable. Look where Madara Uchiha ended up. He believed he was unbeatable." Sasuke said, "I guess, but what do you mean by the truth?" "I'll tell you everything, Sasuke, and I won't hold back. But I want you to promise me right now that you will finally change your long-held attitude and start opening up more." Sasuke tried to look irritated, but the look Itachi gave him prevented that from happening. He didn't appear particularly pleased about it, but after a brief pause, he nodded his head. "You will start reconnecting with your friends. You will stop trying to frighten our sister who just wants to spend time with her big brother, and you will stop ignoring our mother who cares and loves you too much to see you shut her out." "I'll try." Before turning to face Naruto, Itachi said, "Thank you. Could you do something about his nose?" "Sure." Naruto knelt beside Itachi, then took Sasuke's head in his hands and placed his thumbs in front of his nose. "This is going to hurt," Naruto said. "Are you prepared?" Naruto pushed his thumbs down on Sasuke's nose and pushed it back into place after Sasuke nodded his head. The sound was nauseating, and Sasuke grunted in pain, but he was able to endure it. "All you guys to talk, though I will say one thing before I leave. I hear you have had a bit of an obsession with my sister Mito and have been giving looks that have been making her feel uncomfortable." Naruto's eyes grew colder by the second, causing Sasuke to swallow and forget his previous attitude. "If I find out you tried anything, and I mean anything without her consent, I will personally gut you like a fish and feed you to my tigers," Naruto said. drawing Shisui out of the seal in his wrist and sticking the tip of the blade just beneath Sasuke's chin, frightening the boy with its proximity to his skin and speed. Does that make sense? Before Naruto vanished in a whirl of leaves, Sasuke muttered, "Understood." He attempted to glare, but stopped when he noticed Itachi staring at him. "What?" "I would consider the threat to be serious. He has gutted people and fed them to his tigers, as I have witnessed." Sasuke's face turned pale before he grudgingly nodded, saying, "Come with me. Be very careful." Itachi assisted Sasuke in standing up before they both vanished in a flurry of leaves, leaving the training ground deserted. "I think I owe you a conversation." The following day in the crowded Jonin Hall, Naruto sat next to Hana and Hayate, who were seated on the cushioned floor with all the other Jonin from the Leaf Village. Across the room, he could see Kakashi, who had his usual silver hair that defied gravity, sitting on the floor with Asuma, Kurenai, and Guy. They all knew that they were all there to talk about the upcoming Chunin exams, which were just 2 weeks away. Itachi wasn't there because he was on an Anbu mission, and Mikoto was at home because she was still considered a retired Jonin. Kushina took a seat at the front of the group. Minato wore his Hokage hat, and Hiruzen took his place next to him. They waited patiently until the side door at the front of the room opened, and Minato, Hiruzen, Kaharu, Homura, and the Jonin commander Shikaku Nara entered and took their seats in front of the room. Danzo was nowhere to be seen, which was not surprising as the man rarely left his own personal quarters, though he and Itachi both knew the man was probably in the secret root bunker somewhere in the village. After a few moments, everyone watched Minato get up and set his Hokage hat on the desk in front of him. "Good morning, everyone," said Minato, as the Jonin entered the room quietly and waited for the meeting to start. "You are all probably aware of the purpose of this meeting and that the Chunin exams are scheduled to take place in 2 weeks. Naruto heard some whispers and murmurs among his fellow Jonin as he observed everyone nodding their heads. "Since it's so close, it's time to let everyone know what will be happening this year," Naruto said. "Naturally, the written exam will be the first test, and it will be administered at the academy. To try to fool the genin, I intend to have 2 of our Chunin set up a genjutsu on the lower level. We will be eliminating those who are not prepared very quickly if they are unable to see through it. Ibiki Morino, the head of the interrogation corps, will proctor the first exam." Ibiki got up from his seat and bowed to the Hokage and the elders while glaring at some of the other Jonin, which caused many to shiver. He sat back down, acknowledging that some of the Jonin had already begun to pay their respects to the genin who would have to face him. The Forest of Death will be the setting for the survival exercise that will be the second exam. After passing the first exam, the genin will receive one of the 2 scrolls, which they must retrieve, and they will have 5 days to collect both. After obtaining both, they must proceed straight to the tower situated in the center of the forest. Anko Mitarashi of the Interrogation Corps will serve as the proctor for the second exam. Her friends had to laugh at her antics and were happy to show her excitement, but Hana and Naruto quickly silenced them after hearing them. Like Ibiki, Anko stood up and bowed to the Hokage and elders, but she also had a very pleased look on her face and waved to everyone else in the room. Lastly, the yearly 1-on-1 competition will undoubtedly be the third test. As usual, it will take place at Konoha Stadium, which was repaired after the Sandame and my son partially destroyed the field. The third exam proctor will be Genma, Naruto said, feeling embarrassed as he heard laughter coming from all around him, including his mother's loudest laugh and Anko's headlock and ruffling of his hair. Minato sat back down and got a pen and paper as he started to prepare to list down the teams and the name of those from the Leaf that would be competing. Naruto watched as 5 of the Jonin senseis stood up, including his mother, who was grinning proudly. Genma stood up and did his part before sitting back down. "Now would the Jonin senseis all stand up and give us the names of the genin in your team that you are putting forward?" "I, Kakashi Hatake, nominate Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno and Eiji Namikaze of Team 7. I, Kurenai Yuhi, nominate Hinata Hyuga, Yakumu Kurama and Shino Aburame of Team 8. I, Might Guy, nominate Rock Lee, Ten and Neji Hyuga of Team 9. I, Asuma Sarutobi of Team 10, nominate Choji Akamichi, Ino Yamanaka and Kiba Inazuka of Team 10. I, Kushina Namikaze of Team 11, nominate Mito Namikaze, Shikamaru Nara and Sai of Team 11. At the nominations, the room erupted in whispers, as everyone seemed taken aback that the village rookies were being put into the Chunin exams so quickly. After only 6 months, they had to wonder how far they could have come, but Naruto knew how far they had come, having witnessed firsthand how Sakura was making good progress in her medical ninja training, how Eiji had defeated Haku with Sasuke, and how Mito and her team were getting along despite their frequent arguments. As everyone turned to face the Jonin who had spoken, Naruto heard, Hokage. Sama. Which other villages will be sending teams this year? Since everyone knew they needed to be alert when other villages sent teams to Konoha, that piqued everyone's interest. Well, there are a lot of them this year. Kusagakure, Takigakure, Otogakure, Omegakure, and even some from Sanagakure are represented among our teams. Suna had been a fairly positive ally over the last 2 decades, but there was always going to be some mistrust. According to what the Cage told me, his children will be participating this year, no doubt to help spice up the Chunin exams this year. No one seemed to bother with the teams from the smaller villages. However, that's not all. Naruto's head snapped up and turned to face his father before he could think about it any further. I received 2 messages over the past 3 days before this meeting, and it seems that Kirigakure will also be taking part and will be sending 2 teams to compete. Not only that, but Iwagakure will also be sending multiple teams this year. Along with the teams, Iwagakure has decided to finally reach out to us and put together some kind of alliance between our 2 villages. Many of the Konoha shinobi appeared irate and began muttering profanity, particularly in Iwa's direction, after he had finished speaking. Everyone knew there was still animosity between their 2 villages because many had lost loved ones in the Third Shinobi War. Kushina was frowning, too. The idea of so many possible dangers in Konoha, particularly close to her children, bothered her. Many of the Konoha mothers in the room were thinking about that. However, Naruto wore a megawatt smile on his face and ignored everyone else in the room. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to conceal it. He was too joyful. In order to start peace negotiations and forge an alliance between their 2 villages, Kurotsuchi was finally making his way to Konoha. It's possible that their reveal date was closer than he thought. Since most people were too preoccupied with discussing the tests, nobody seemed to notice the smile. All except Sandaime Hokage, who is always perceptive. So what's making him so happy? As she and Naruto stood in the treetops overlooking a narrow alleyway in the southern part of the Konoha, Anko grinned and said, "Nah, look at how cute they all look." They concealed their presence from the genin below by standing side by side. As they were walking by, they saw Eiji pursuing a furious-looking Sakura who was sprinting after Konohamaru Sarutobi. When the pink-haired girl finally got hold of the young boy's blue scarf and gradually drew him toward her balled fist, he appeared to be completely terrified. The boy escaped her clutches somehow, but he was confronted by a group of Suna shinobi. A big bandaged object was draped over the back of the male, who was dressed entirely in black. With a smug grin on his face and his face covered in purple paint, he lifted Konohamaru into the air using the hem of his shirt. Despite having the same height, the girl next to him seemed to be the more mature of the 2. Her blonde hair was pulled back in 4 ponytails, and she wore a purple top that covered part of her shoulders with fishnet. She had a big fan on her back that was nearly the same size as her, and a red sash was fastened tightly around her waist. Unquestionably a wind user in Naruto's perspective. As they watched, Eiji stepped forward to tell the boya, whose name was later revealed to be Kankuro, to let Konohamaru down or he would apologize. The blonde girl, who turned out to be named Temari, laughed at the threat. Kankuro appeared eager to start a fight with Eiji, as Naruto and Anko could see. As the son of the Cage, I'm looking forward to testing how weak the son of the Yondaime Hokage is. As they continued to observe the small screen in front of them, Anko muttered, "So that's the Cage's kids? Not bad, I guess. Though neither of them are higher than a high genin level." Naruto saw Eiji glaring at each other while toying with one of the tri-pronged kunai he carried in his shinobi pouch. As the girl gently pushed him behind her while maintaining her gaze on the Suna ninjas, Kankuro dropped Konohamaru, who clambered up and ran behind Sakura, forgetting his previous fear of her. Even though Kankuro didn't appear to be listening, his hands were gripping the object on his back. Temari warned, "Kankuro, now is not the time to start a fight with a leaf shinobi. You know Baki Sensei will have our hides if we caused any trouble. You want to use crow?" He-I-J-J-I. Naruto sighs as everyone herds. He had hoped that there wouldn't be any problems, but with his sister here, the likelihood had increased. Eiji jumped around as if she had too much sugar for lunch when Mito landed next to her. When she saw the Suna nins, she said, "Old man Tucci said we can have all the ramen we want since the Chunin exams are tomorrow. Come on." But then stopped. "Who are the weirdas?" Kankuro scowled at the girl with the blonde hair as the 2 Suna nin made tick marks on their foreheads. As he recognized her, he glanced between the 2 siblings. As Mito realized why Eiji appeared so combative, Kankuro grabbed the bandaged item on his back and slammed it to the ground. "Ha, even better. My 2.san said the Hokage had twins, but I didn't know for sure until now." She scowled and placed her hands on her hips, shifting her sword, which was fastened to her back, slightly forward to allow the Chunin to catch the handle's glint. Anko asked, "Should we step in?" But Naruto shook his head. As he leaned against the tree, Naruto clarified, "Only if things get out of hand. We don't really need any incident between two shinobi of two different villages getting serious. Even if Suna are our allies, these are still the children of their cage. Vice versa for our village." Anko looked to the haired boy who was quietly observing from the top of the trees and asked, "When do you think Gourd Boy is going to stop hiding and actually show himself?" His outfit shouted Suna Shinobi, and it was puzzling that the boy's slender frame could support such a large gourd. The child had dark black bags under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in years. They noticed the boy start to shuffle around and slightly bend forward. Now it looks like. Everyone in the alleyway jumped at the red-haired boy's abrupt voice and looked up at the trees when he said, "Kankuro. Stop being an embarrassment." The red-haired boy glared down at them, and Mito and Eiji appeared shocked that neither of them had detected or recognized him. As they all watched Gaara leap from the tree and land beside Kankuro, Kankuro stumbled, Gaara. The Leaf Genin's spine was chilled by the utterly emotionless expression on his face. As Naruto felt his chakra and realized how malevolent it felt, he narrowed his eyes at him. He couldn't place it, but something about the chakra felt familiar. As he observed Gaara speaking down to his teammates and revealing to the Genin that he was also their brother, he muttered, "Peculiar." Gaara went to leave after saying, "Baki. Sensei is probably waiting for us at the hotel." However, they all watched him pause and turn to look at the Leaf Genin. What is your name?" Eiji arched an eyebrow at him, but when his sister attempted to stop him, he moved forward and gently pushed her hand down. "My name is." Gaara said, "No, not you." Eiji became silent and scowled when he saw Gaara gesture to Mito. Who are you?" Naruto in the tree smiled as Mito proudly said, My name is Mito Namikaze, and don't ever forget it. I'm the one that will be winning the Chunin exam this year, just like my Oni-san. Why? Want to know you will be wiping the floor with you." The twins and Sakura turned a little pale when he told her, "No, I don't give a damn about that, and I will spill your blood on the ground just as easily as all the others I have met." His voice gradually became a whisper before he started to leave. "No, mother, what's you dead? She doesn't like what you house. What you contain. She wants you dead. I will abide by mother." Tamari and Kankuro trailed him as he walked away, with Kankuro placing the bandaged item back on his back. Before they departed, he gave the Leaf Genin a shady glance. They all exhaled with relief when they left, secretly grateful that there had not been a fight that evening. Sakura said, "Mother, what a whack job." Then she returned her focus to Konohamaru, who was looking at her with fear before she slammed her fist down on top of his head. "Oh." Mito's eyes followed the scuttling boy, and she whispered, "How did he know?" As her hand moved to the seal on her stomach. As he watched her confidence wane, Eiji put his arm around his twins and said, "No one should know." He wanted to comfort her before letting his eyes settle on the retreating Chunin, which gradually turned into a frightening glare. As they watched what had just happened, the two friends' light-hearted banter had long since vanished up in the trees. With the serious Kunoichi now present and her playful act gone, Anko said, "Naruto." As the Gaara walked away, both of their eyes were fixed on him. "He knows about her. How?" Naruto wasn't sure either, but he came to the only logical conclusion he could think of after mentioning how his mother had spoken to him and the gourd on his back, which gave him an idea of what was inside. He pondered whether his parents were aware of this. "Anko, what Biju lies with Suna?" Before alarms sounded in her mind, Anko said, "The one tail. You think?" "Yeah, I think so. That boy is the Jinchuriki of One Tail Shukaku, and he's just picked Mito as his target for the Chunin exams." The following day, with a smile, Naruto gave the twins a double hug, and they were delighted to return the favor. "Good luck to both of you. I know you're both going to do great." He was followed by Minato and Kushina, who had just finished their good luck speeches and advised them to listen to their proctors and be prepared for anything. Shizune and Mina were having their weekly lesson at the hospital. As she and Eiji crossed their arms and smiled, Mito told him, "Of course we are. We're gonna kick ass and take names. Just you wait, Oni. Chan will be at the top in no time." When they both naturally mimicked each other's movements, it was unsettling. It had to have been one of those strange twins. "Well, still, I want you both to look out for each other. Even if you might be opposite teams, I still want you both to look out for each other when you come across one another. No being too rough on each other, you hear?" Despite Mito punching her left hand into her right palm, Eiji nodded. It made Naruto sigh and ruffle their hair. but both swiftly smacked it away in frustration. I'll try, but I can't promise. Minato stepped forward and said, okay, you two better get going. I know you don't want to be late. I know you would both do us all proud. Give them hell. Both of them echoed, yes sir, before sprinting off to meet their teams. Before they vanished from view, the three watched them leave. Without the twins' voices, the place was silent. Naruto turned to his father and said, 2-San, did you know the Kage's son was a Jinchuriki? He nodded his head, and he heard him sigh. Naruto could tell by the look on Kushina's face that she also knew. We knew. As part of our alliance with Suna, the name of the Jinchuriki of the village's Biju had to be known in order for the trust between our two villages to have a foundation. The identity of a Jinchuriki is a big deal even if some villages hide it and others don't. Minato disclosed. Only myself, your mother and the elders are aware, while the Kage and their elders are aware of Mito. They both looked alarmed as he told them, and the Kage's son. He seemed to know when they encountered one another yesterday. It shocked her that he knew and said she was now a target for his mother. Minato raked a hand through his hair and groaned, geez. I had heard the youngest of the Kage was a trouble kid, but this sounds worse than I thought. The Shukaku has been known to be one of the more violent of the Biju. We'll have to keep a close eye on him during the exams. Unless he does something that will get Mito or Leaf Shinobi killed, then all we can do is observe for now. Naruto gently probed his father for information, asking, so did everyone turn up in the end? The Iwa group and Kiri group. Kushina interrupted Minato to say, they did. They all arrived yesterday afternoon and evening. With an unhappy expression on her face, she asked, Naruto, are you sure you want to be the Iwa representative's escort while she's in Konoha? I imagine she might be a little sore still about you beating her during your Chunin exams in Suna? While she was in Konoha for the peace negotiations, she had not been particularly fond of the idea of Naruto offering to be the escort for the Tsuchikage's granddaughter. When an outsider arrived in the village, this was a routine task, but she didn't like that Naruto had to be that person. What Iwa thought of Konoha and Minato was well known. It didn't make her feel any better, even if they were here for peace negotiations. However, Naruto dismissed his mother's remarks, fully aware that their representative was not a cause for concern. He hoped he didn't, anyway. His words didn't do much for Kushina, but she accepted it for the moment. Don't worry about it, Chan. I think I can handle her. On the inside, though, she was already planning to watch them herself as soon as possible. She had no intention of allowing an Iwa Kunoichi to outsmart her son and attempt any amusing stunt. However, Naruto ignored his mother's resolute expression and turned to start walking away. Before meeting his fiery, irritable other half, he needed to investigate something. He heard his father's voice calling out to him as he started to leave the house. Minato told him, Naruto, you have to meet with her at my office in 30 minutes. Don't be late. His son saluted him in return. Got it, 2-San. I'll see you then. Minato stretched his arms after Naruto left, then planned to go to Hireishin's office. Before his son went over, he would have to be present to meet with the representative. He was tired of the hostility between their two villages and secretly hoped for the best. He would go to any lengths if he could be the one to finally bring Iwa and Konoha together. Before he could think, he felt his wife's arms encircle his stomach, and when he turned to face her, he noticed the cunning expression on her face. Kushina. She whispered into his ear, we have the house all to ourselves for a short while. Let's make good use of it. Minato was about to reply when his wife grabbed the hem of his trousers and led him inside. She slammed the door before he heard clothing being taken off and heard lighthearted laughter. Using Rookie Genin as she ran to the room where the exam was supposed to start, Mito urged her twin, come on guys, keep up. Eiji, Team 7, and Team 11 were walking much more slowly behind her than the excited blonde girl, who had a certain bounce to her step from the excitement of the day they were about to have. She was excitedly awaiting the opportunity to advance to the Chunin level because she felt prepared to advance in her shinobi career. She wanted to try to surpass Naruto's accomplishments, which she knew he could accomplish in just a year and at such a young age. As she walked alongside Shikamaru and Sakura, Eiji said, I'm coming, Mito, please slow down. We have 5 minutes before the exam is said to start. Sai was walking behind them, grinning broadly, and Sasuke was a few steps behind him. When they all greeted each other this morning, they all noticed that their Uchiha friend and teammate was a little different. Compared to the typical stern and foggy air he had carried for so long, he appeared much less tense and the atmosphere around him felt much more serene. He hardly spoke since they formed a group, but at least he didn't try to disparage any of his teammates or the opposing team and kept any unfavorable remarks to himself. They had no idea what had changed, but whatever it was, the dark haired boy was no longer as much of a hassle in their thoughts. He even assisted them in determining that the room on the floor beneath them was not where the Chunin exams would be held, but rather a room covered with a genjutsu to make genin appear to be late. Sakura stated that they shouldn't be shocked that they were being tested before the exam even began, even though the revelation shocked them. It served as yet another method of eliminating the weak and those who weren't prepared to advance in their shinobi careers. Before letting out a sigh, Shikamaru said, "Someone's sure excited. He was worn out just watching Mito get so excited. I should have just stayed in bed. I can already tell this is going to be a drag." Eiji, who was standing next to him, raised an eyebrow at him. "If you think that, then why are you taking part?" The Nara gave Eiji a crazy look in return. Eiji looked back and saw his sister barely controlling her excitement, with a gleam in her eye that looked like their mother when something was getting her blood pumping. "You're kidding, right? I don't want to have my mother, your mother, and my teammate constantly hounding me if I said no thanks. Have you met them? They're all completely insane." Upon reflection, he was unable to hold Shikamaru responsible. He was accustomed to Mito and her tendency toward excitation. Shikamaru was the complete opposite of her. Eiji turned around and looked at Sakura after acknowledging, "Yeah, I can understand that. Are you okay, Sakura? You've been kinda quiet." When she was thinking about the Chunin exams, the pink-haired girl was lost in her own world. She didn't realize he was attempting to get her attention until Eiji asked again. She turned to face him, chuckling uneasily as she embarrassedly scratched her forehead with her index finger. "I'm okay, Eiji. I'm just thinking about the exams." Nervous, she confessed, a little. She sounded anxious, and Eiji quickly recognized it by putting his arms behind his head as they made their way to the exam room. "Do you really think we are ready for this? We really haven't been genin for all that long." "I am honestly not sure, but I don't think Kakashi-sensei or my parents would let us compete if they didn't think we were ready. We already know how dangerous mission can be. After all, with everything that happened in Wave, I think the three of us have all had that drilled into our heads." Sakura gave a nod. For all of them, the Wave mission had opened their eyes. The boy, who was still a few paces behind them, was listening in on their conversation. "But then again, the three of us have trained a lot in 3 months. I'm a lot faster and stronger than I was back in Wave, and so is Sasuke. And you have been studying and training with Miss Shizune. That means you have definitely got stronger too, right?" I guess that's true." Although she had not yet mastered or perfected the skills she had learned from Shizune, she was now able to tell others that she could use the Shozen Jutsu to a level that would be advantageous to her and her team. She had also mastered the art of dodging, and Kakashi-sensei was helping her with it by having Sasuke and Eiji hurl shurikens and kunai at her across a training field. Even though her chakra reserves had been significantly increased and her obsession with Sasuke had finally subsided, her control was perfect as usual. Sakura's eyes widened momentarily as Eiji put an arm around her shoulders and reassured her, "Don't worry, Sakura. As long as we stick together, we will make it through these exams. That's a promise." She forced herself to look more confident while swallowing her nerves and fear. She did not want to disappoint her teammates. When the group of 6 reached the door, Mito grasped the handle and pushed it open, guiding them into the room where the other teams were waiting. After entering, they all paused and took a large gulp. There was little space between individuals and their teams because genin from all over the elemental nations were packed into one room, taking up the entire space. The majority appeared older than the Konoha shinobi group, making them the exam's youngest participants. A group of Kusa shinobi who appeared to be in their late teens or early 20s were the oldest. Every single head turned to face them, and every single face was either expressionless or annoyed. Because of their age and size in relation, some were even mocking them. Sakura looked around the room and muttered, "That's a lot of people." "Well, my 2.san did say there was a lot of entrants this year. Almost every country sent genin this year," Eiji replied. Despite his best efforts to hide it, he felt a little intimidated by all of the older genin who were staring at them. The 6 of them turned to face Team 8 and Team 10, who were standing off to the side, and exclaimed, "Hey guys. About time you all got here." They all felt their breath catch. Little Akamaru was standing at Kiba's feet when he called out to them and waved them over, a smile on his face. Kurumu and Hinata waved to the group behind him, as did Ino and Choji. Shino nodded to them in acknowledgement but remained silent as usual. Although they were only a few meters away, another genin team from Konoha was standing close to them. As he gave Kiba a high five, Eiji said, "I'm glad to see you guys here." He gave the blonde girl a quick wave when he noticed Ino behind Kiba staring at him. "Hey Ino-chan." With her hands behind her back, the girl approached her crush with a bright smile. "Hi Eiji-kun. In an attempt to intimidate and scare away the youngest Chunin exam participants, the group tried to ignore the looks they were receiving from the other groups while they were talking. With their backs to the wall, Suna's San siblings stood on the other side of the room, staring at the rookies' 12 members they had met earlier that day, particularly the twin Namakazes. With his hands in his pockets and a slack expression on his face, Konkuro muttered, "I bet they won't last the first round. To think brats like them would be in the Chunin exams." He was completely unconcerned about the tests. As long as his younger sibling didn't try to make him one of his most recent victims, that is. Tamari asked out loud in response to her younger brother, "I dunno about that. Two of them are the children of the Hokage and his famed Uzumaki wife. And I hear the rest of them are children from noticeable clans. They could be more than just a thorn in our side." Instead of responding to his sister, the red-haired boy continued to stare intently at the blonde twins he had met earlier in the day. "What do you think, Gaara?" he asked, particularly toward the Mito, from whom he sensed a great deal of power. You will demonstrate my presence, outside." Gazing into the room from the building across the street, Naruto pondered, "That's one packed room. I think there's even more genin in there than when we were in the Chunin exams." He stood next to Itachi, who was always composed and stoic. Anko was in another place, getting ready to make a big entrance for the genin who passed the first test. You think they would come up with something different for the first examen instead of the same written test." Itachi gave a shrug. Itachi looked at the large group of genin for a few seconds before focusing on the three Sand siblings. "It's a useful first test. Help to weed out the ones who are not ready to take the next step and become a Chunin." "That the one?" Naruto turned to face Gaara warily and said, "Yeah, that's him." It didn't sit well with Naruto that another Jinchuriki was showing interest in his sister, but there wasn't much he could do about it at the moment. "I think he's already decided to lock onto Mito from their earlier meeting. I have a feeling he might be someone who will cause our siblings some trouble throughout the test. He doesn't strike me as someone who will allow fear or caution to hinder him. My sensory skills might not be as pinpoint as yours, but I can tell he has an enormous amount of chakra, which is likely due to the Biju he carries. I hope Sasuke does nothing to antagonize him. Even though the youngest son of the Uchiha family has gradually changed, he may still be a bit of a snob when it comes to his own skills and still made sure he was better than everyone else." "Well, you said Sasuke seems to be changing himself for the better since being told the truth about that night. Perhaps if he is as good as he thinks he is, then he can tell Gaara is not someone he wants to try to push and shove, so to speak." However, Kakashi claimed that he was getting better at working with others and that he and Eiji were not fighting or bickering as much as they once were. Additionally, Sasuke's mood appeared to improve since Sakura was no longer bothering him. Most people still thought the boy was a miserable git, but at least to his family, he had broken out of the shell he had put himself in. Makoto was just happy that her son was back. As Naruto sensed Ibiki approaching the exam room with his serene yet somewhat gloomy chakra signature, he said, "Here comes Ibiki." A sizable contingent of Chunin stood behind him, all of whom would assist in administering the test and obeying Ibiki's directions. "Guess we should get going." Even though the raven-haired Uchiha wanted to stay and keep watching over Sasuke as he studied for the first exam, he had obligations elsewhere. "Agreed. I need to be back at Anbu HQ. If I leave now I should still make it on time." After seeing his longtime friend nod, Naruto watched Itachi vanish in a swarm of crows, a means of transportation he had grown accustomed to seeing the Uchiha use since returning to the village. "You still planning on watching over Exam 2 at the forest?" Naruto asked. He turned fast and made his way to the Hokage building, saying, "I guess I should get going too. I got an Iwa shinobi to see." 5 minutes later, Naruto entered his father's office casually and was greeted by a scene that, to be honest, did not particularly surprise him. Hiruzen stood to his left, gazing out the window and over the village, while his father stood behind his desk, his fingers interlaced. Naruto was aware that the young woman occupying the seat directly across from Minato was the cause of their solemn demeanor. When he was in front of his father and grandfather figure, he tried his hardest not to smile. Kurotsuchi crossed her arms and sat with her left leg thrown over her right. She appeared to be thinking deeply as her eyes were closed at the moment. She appeared fairly similar to how she had appeared when they had first met in Wave Country, dressed in her typical Iwa shinobi garb. A big man who was considerably taller and heavier than she was standing beside her, just behind her, and was probably serving as her bodyguard. The moment Naruto entered the Hokage office, the silence was nearly at its height. Although it was to be expected at the beginning of what would be a series of meetings over the course of the Chunin exams, negotiations had been slow thus far and not much progress had been made. Iwa were notorious for being nitpicky, hard-headed, and stubborn when they wanted to be. He had never met the Tsuchikage, but Kurotsuchi had given him a sense of who he was. As he made his way to the office desk, he said, "I hope I'm on time." He saw Hiruzen turn his head and smile at him, and Minato got up and started talking. The girl slowly opened her eyes and looked up at Naruto, giving the younger blonde a quick look at the pink eyes that he adored. "You're just in time. It's been some years since you last met, but I'm sure you remember the Tsuchikage's granddaughter Kurotsuchi." Even though her eyes had a playful expression that he recognized from their time together, he could see the corners of her lips resisting the urge to smile much like him. Her bodyguard straightened up as she got up, making sure to be near his cage's granddaughter. With her arms folded across her chest, Kurotsuchi looked up at Naruto and turned her head. Unaware that Kurotsuchi's actions were merely a performance, the Hokage and his predecessor observed as she seemed to be mentally assessing Naruto. Before she finally spoke, they tensed for a moment as her index finger repeatedly jabbed Naruto in the chest. "You look far more flaky than you did back in Suna." Both Minato and Hiruzen would have been mortified by the comment if they hadn't been here on official business. In all honesty, they were hoping she would say something a little more disrespectful or even offensive to Naruto rather than something so trivial or even lighthearted. Instead of taking offense, Naruto chuckled and put his hands in his pockets when they turned to face him. Kurotsuchi smiled and held her head up, saying, "Well, it's nice to see you too. You look like you got stronger since we last met." He chuckled to himself at the irritated expression on her face and said, "I had hoped that defeat I handed you hadn't left too much of a mark on you. What can I say? Defeat only pushes someone to become stronger. Gives us a purpose." Her gaze widened. "My grandfather and father upped my training in the last few years. You'll find I'm in a very different league too back then." "I have no doubt." Kurotsuchi tapped her foot on the ground. "And I have no doubt you have been training too. After all, you managed to get into the bingo book as a S-ranked shinobi. How very impressive." He took the bingo book that was typically on his father's desk and opened it to the page he was on to emphasize the statement. "Well, you should know. Your grandfather was the one that put me in there." Kurotsuchi was then forced to look at the contents as he turned it in her direction. "I feel flattered you would hold me in such high esteem." She smirked, which only caused him to smirk back at her. "It's no problem at all. Iwa knows when to look out for any potential threats." Notwithstanding the Fa section aid, the two had no trouble confronting each other in this manner. After all, they were attempting to beat the living daylights out of each other when they first met. When they were together, there was always a feeling that they were competing with each other, even though it was such a minor matter. "Perhaps a future spar is in order." "I think that might be in order." Her bodyguard stepped forward behind Kurotsuchi, keeping a close eye on Naruto to make sure he didn't try anything. Back in Iwa, Kurotsuchi was regarded as a bit of a hothead, and he was aware that her mouth occasionally led to problems. The young man in front of her was not your typical shinobi, but he was confident she could compete with other Konoha shinobi. Minato swiftly expressed an idea in his head because he felt that the tension in the room was getting a little too much and he didn't want his son and their guest to start using their fists more than their words. "Well, maybe we could set up something like that later," Minato said, getting up from his seat. "Kurotsuchi-san, how about we continue our meetings tomorrow? We have a lot to discuss and I expect we will be having many long discussions in the coming weeks during your stay." He glanced over to his child. "Perhaps Naruto could show you around the village." I suppose we can do that. I'll be here for some time, so I may as well get to know the village, especially if our two villages are going to be civil towards one another from now. I guess I can get a good look at what makes the village of tree huggers so special." Kurotsuchi glances back at Naruto with a gaze. "Well, what do you say?" Naruto gave her a brief bow while wearing a smile. "This way, milady." As he led Kurotsuchi and her bodyguard through the Konoha marketplace, Naruto weaved in and out of the crowd, asking, "So is the village to your liking, Kunoichi-chan?" Due in large part to the Chunin exams being held in Konoha this year, the market was bustling with both domestic and international vendors. Businesses and tourists, who are aware of the attention the Chunin exams garner nationwide and the number of people they attract, always accompanied the exams when they visited any shinobi village. Many had already come to the village and set up shop, even though the tournament wouldn't begin for another month. The marketplace was filled with vibrant colors and rich scents, from fruits to textiles, and Naruto was not at all surprised by how popular it had grown. Even though many of their ranks were on missions or participating in the Chunin exams, it was only natural that security would rise as a result of the large number of people entering the village. He sensed that the stationed Anbu were all in their concealed places, even though no one could see them. The fact that they were being watched was not apparent to the civilians. In the meantime, Kurotsuchi observed the people going about their daily lives, and it was precisely as Naruto had always told her in their meetings or in the letters they exchanged through summons. It had a lot of light and warmth that just came from the people who inhabited it. She thought she was looking at a living painting because of the architectural design of the houses and the vibrant hues of the acres of trees that surrounded the village. Being an Iwa shinobi, Konoha had always been explained to them in a particular way, along with what to anticipate if they ever saw it. But now that she could finally claim to have been on Leaf soil, she could honestly say that the place wasn't all that horrible. She could see Konoha coming in second, but she was certain that Iwa would always be her favorite place in the world because it had a certain charm that only locals could fully appreciate. She was in love with a blonde fool, but she would never tell him about it because she would never hear the end of it. He turned his head for a moment, and she saw his lips curl into a grin before turning back around. I suppose the village is quite nice. It's no Iwa, but then again Iwa is unique in itself. Konoha isn't so bad. What about you, Shinobi-san? What do you think of my humble home? The stern, looking Iwa shinobi simply grunted loudly and didn't even look at him. I guess that's the best I can receive, so I'll take it. As a matter of fact, he had maintained his focus and stayed on Kurotsuchi's course. He spoke to Kurotsuchi once more, not particularly interested in what the man thought. Is there anywhere you would like to visit? Perhaps the hot springs? Konoha is known to have some of the best in the land. There was a gleam in her eyes as she grinned and said, anywhere will be fine. Wherever you decide will be adequate. Besides, I wouldn't want people peeking on me while I go in the springs. I hear Konoha has a bad habit of people peeping on women here. I wouldn't want the wrong person getting a sneak peek. Before he responded to her, he thought, no, but I can bet there's someone you wouldn't mind teasing with that very idea. Of course. Perhaps the top of the Hokage mountain would be a good choice to visit next. The view of the village from the top is second to none. He rolled his eyes at her remark, despite his best efforts to ignore it. Then please lead the way. Then again, by how slowly you walk we likely won't get to the top until it's dark. Unbeknownst to Kurotsuchi and her bodyguard, the two were actually being watched from a distance by the most unlikely individual, who was avoiding Naruto's line of sight and avoiding being detected by his senses. Fortunately, Naruto was currently only using his senses to sense things that were close to him and Kurotsuchi. Mina Namikaze gazed at her brother and the two he was escorting around the village, her violet eyes glinting as she peered up from behind a wooden crate that belonged to one of the numerous market vendors. After leaving a friend's house, she had seen them as she passed the Hokage building. She considered visiting her father, but she decided to see Naruto and his visitors instead. She didn't really care who the man was who was ignoring Naruto. Instead, she was more interested in the black-haired girl who appeared to be approaching her beloved Chan too closely. She was unable to hear what they were saying, but she didn't want to approach them too closely for fear of being noticed. She watched them both from a distance. Despite not displaying it, Naruto was well aware that Mina was following them from afar. He could tell someone was falling without using his senses. In addition, there were only two individuals in Konoha with that particular shade of red hair, and neither of them was tall enough to be his mother. Only his youngest sister remained. I nearly feel guilty for seeing her right away, but then again, I know Mina better than most. His sisters might become a little envious when he wasn't focusing on them, and it's likely that his being spotted with a girl they didn't recognize would not have been well received at first. She is, at least, more reserved than Mito. She would be yelling it to the whole community. As he turned to face Kurotsuchi again and noticed her leaning close, he heard, "What are you looking for?" His gaze instantly shifted to the bodyguard, but he soon realized that a few young ladies gathered around one of the numerous market stalls had diverted his attention. He jumped right into the conversation after spotting a fleeting opportunity to avoid acting around Kurotsuchi. He watched her turn her head and noticed her eyes starting to look down the road. "Turn behind you and look straight down the road we walked. Now look towards the stall we passed a half a minute ago with the bright purple fabrics decorating the top." Kurotsuchi began, "What about?" but abruptly stopped when she noticed a tiny head emerge from the side of the stall. Now that it was visible, the red hair was impossible to ignore. "Is that who I think it is?" Even Kurotsuchi, who usually presents herself as a tough girl, couldn't help but show her tender side in response to Naruto's statement. "Yep, that's Mina. She's been tailing us since we left the Hokage building. I noticed her when we left but didn't want to say anything." She was also happy that she could at last give the young girl Naruto had told her so much about a face. She was shocked that no one had noticed her sooner because of how striking her red hair made her stand out from the crowd. She quickly lifted her hand and pinched his cheek before bringing it back to her side, saying, "Nah, how sweet. Little Chan trying to protect her big Oni-san. I bet you're like a giant marshmallow when it comes to her, aren't you?" When he didn't respond, she smiled, knowing she had gotten it exactly right. A picture of Mina ordering her brother to do her bidding and Naruto obeying her like a good puppy was now visible to her. Naruto was well trained by the women in his life, and it was good to see that they weren't the only ones who had him smitten. After finally turning his attention from the group of women to Kurotsuchi, Naruto merely groaned in frustration and rubbed the area of his cheek that had been pulled before they swiftly resumed their role as Kurotsuchi's bodyguard. When he saw that Naruto was staring at him, he grunted, which caused Naruto to shrug and turn back to face him. He and Kurotsuchi both had a smile on their faces as they continued on to their next stop. Exam Chunin Ibiki said, "Congratulations, you all passed the first test," as he glanced at the other teams across the room. As each genin sank back into their chair, feeling as though they had just avoided being struck in the face by an exploding paper tag, the sound of their sighs of relief reverberated throughout the room. "That was more intense than I thought it was going to be," Sakura said, rubbing her forehead one hand. When the actual written test task was revealed, she was sweating profusely and her hands and forehead were clammy from the previous 5 minutes. The written exam for the genin test seemed easy because she had never in her life experienced such a build-up of anxiety and stress before. She pondered how people who decided not to take the 10th question must have felt or would feel after learning that answering the question was the real test. If they were prepared to keep going in spite of the obstacles in their way. Sakura wanted to raise her hand in the air and refused to answer the question on multiple occasions over the previous 5 minutes. But she was being stopped by something inside of her. She didn't want to disappoint her team or those who had faith in her. When the announcement was made, she had seen Sasuke and Eiji, and she was astounded by how composed they both managed to remain. Some, like Tamari, Kiba, and Ino, expressed their disapproval but continued to answer the question. While everyone else kept moving forward, nobody wanted to disappoint anyone or be left behind. From 2 rows behind her, she heard Eiji ask, "You okay, Sakura?" and turned to face him. She could tell he was more anxious than she thought because his hands were behind his head and his breathing was labored. She gave him a little thumbs up and smiled. "I'm okay. Mentally exhausted, but I'm okay. That was more intense than I thought." Eiji then turned to face Sasuke, who had also turned his head in that direction, and said, "I understand what you mean. I'm happy we were able to persevere, though." After a brief moment of eye contact, the 2 boys simply nodded to each other. The remaining team immediately gathered across the room to celebrate passing the first exam, however briefly they were able to do so. Mito was more thrilled than anyone else, punching the air with joy as he swiftly put Sai and Shikamaru in tight headlocks, much to Nara's chagrin. With a megawatt grin that lit up the entire room, she said, "We kick as much butt." Nobody was going to stop her from reaching the top where she was headed. The window on the side of the room shattered a moment later, and everyone saw a figure enter through it, roll across the floor, and stop right in front of Ibiki, who appeared more irritated than he had been for the whole hour. Anko, dressed as usual, stood in front of the entire exam hall, her hands on her hips and her eyes gleaming sickly as she looked out across the vast room with a smirk that promised pain. The words, "Here comes the second test's proctor, the wonderful and sexy Anko Midarashi," were displayed on a banner behind her, held aloft by 2 kunai that protruded from the ceiling. Most people in the room were staring at the woman in disbelief at how she had come in, while others blushed at her outfit because they could see her breasts curved through the mesh shirt. The only people who did not react were Mito and Eiji, who gasped upon seeing their longtime friend and comrade Oni-chan. Both of them recalled the events of their previous spar with the woman with the purple hair. Both, however, believed that the insane kunoichi were torturing them. They could still clearly recall all the snake bites they had received on their arms while they were being pursued. Why was she the one who had to do it? Anko couldn't help but let her gaze drop when she noticed how many of the teams were still in the room. She believed that Ibiki's test would have eliminated at least 2/3 of them, but nearly half of the room remained occupied. She estimated that there must have been between 70 and 80 individuals remaining, meaning that about 25 teams were still taking the exams. "I think you're beginning to lose your touch, Ibiki. There's still a whole load of them left." All Ibiki said before turning around and hurriedly leaving the room, his long black jacket whipping into the air, was, "I guess we just have a good crop of potential Chunins this year." Anko put her hands on her hips, looked out across the room, and started talking to all the genin. "Yeah, well, I guess it's up to me to weed out the weaklings that somehow managed to get past you. Alright, you maggots, listen up and listen well. I don't know how you all managed to get past Ibiki's test, but if I had to, I'd say it was nothing but luck. You will all find very quickly that your luck has just run out." Akusa genin exclaimed, "What's that supposed to mean?" It means what I have planned for all you in the second test will make this test look like a cakewalk in comparison. I'm not having any pencil pushers think they're ready to become a Chunin. Now just so we're clear, my name is Anko Mitarashi, Jonin of Konoha and all-around badass. From this point on what I say goes. If I tell you to jump off a bridge then you jump off a bridge, we clear? Anko was soon annoyed by a mumble that could be heard all over the room. I said, are we clear? Yes, Miterashi. San. Anko smiled as she looked around the room, quickly focusing on one duck-haired emo and two very familiar blondes. She swept across the room and sat her down next to Mito, who gasped at how close she was. Well, looky here. Naru and Tachi's baby siblings are still with us. Nah, are you scared of me? I don't bite. At least not that much. Pulling herself together, Mito got up from her chair and gestured at Anko. The people in the room believed Mito to be either very brave or very foolish. You don't scare me, Anko Nei. Chan. I'm gonna be a Chunin whether you're the proctor or not. Just you wait and see. Anko smirked and said, I don't scare you, huh? Wondering what kind of unspeakable horror his sister had just let loose on herself, Eiji could only shudder. Well then, let's put that to the test, shall we? As everyone watched, Anko started whispering something into Mito's ear while leaning in and drawing her closer. As Anko whispered some unidentified words into her ear, everyone watched as Mito's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates and her face gradually turned redder and redder. Mito was able to separate from Anko and cover her ears with her hands a moment later. She exclaimed, La, I'm not listening, la 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 la. As Anko laughed, her joy at Mito's reaction visible on her face. La, that's disgusting, la. Eiji lifted his hand steadily into the air. Eiji feared the response, but he asked, Anko-san, what did you tell Mito to get her to act that way? Anko glanced at the other twin after turning around. Eiji instantly turned pale and followed his sister's lead, putting his hands to his ears and screaming anything to cut Anko's voice off. I told her about the night your brother and I had hot and passionate sex. Except for Sakura, who concealed her blush and started secretly imagining the two together, all the other genin made gagging noises. Now before I take you to where the second task will be held, I have one thing to say. Anko pointed her finger directly at Kiba, who seemed surprised to see her pointing at him. The twins' mortified looks and sounds warmed her heart, but she still needed to say one more thing to get the warm fuzzy feeling she so desperately desired. You. Hana's little brother. Just so you know, I'm having your sister tonight. As Kiba followed the Namikaze twins' example, Anko laughed and went to the window, where she squatted down and got ready to leap toward the building directly across from them. I want every single one of you to be at training ground 44 in 30 minutes. Anyone, not there will be eliminated from the Chunin exams and will find a snake in their bed tomorrow morning. The terrified looking genin and 3 Konoha rookies members wished they could forget what she had told them as Anko left the warning hanging in the room. Monument to Hokage. As Kurotsuchi and her bodyguard stood atop the Hokage monument, surveying the entire village, Naruto remarked, so what do you think? Nice view, huh? For the first time, Kurotsuchi allowed a smile to appear on her face as she stood next to him, surveying the village. The way the sun shone on the tops of the trees that encircled the village and accentuated the warmth of the surrounding stone and gravel was really lovely. Instead of sensing Mina in the immediate vicinity, Naruto sensed her returning home, where their mother was probably making dinner. She would undoubtedly tell Kushina what she had witnessed today. That was an idea. Who knows, maybe Chan planned to have her tell me. It wasn't a lie, and she didn't have to pretend to be a certain way with her bodyguard hanging back. Yes, it's very nice. He was looking out at the village as well, and although he would not acknowledge it, he found the view to be satisfying and mentally stored a picture for later use. Do you come up here often? Naruto gave a nod. I do, though I normally sit on the stone faces of cage, usually on top of the sandame's head. I come up here a few times a week to watch the sunset. That must be a great view. It is. Perhaps sometime during your stay you could see it. It's not a sight one could forget very easily. She calmly exhaled and wished her bodyguard wasn't present at the moment. No, I imagine it's not. She felt compelled to lean into the young man standing next to her in order to feel his warmth against the sun that shone down on them, even though she wasn't particularly affectionate in public. We have a place similar to this that allows us to look over the village. I could compare the site in the same way to this one. Really? Yeah. Right in the center of the village is the Hokage Tower, a tall building higher than the other buildings. The Tsuchikage is located at the very top and looks over the entire village in a full 360-degree view. She replied. I would go there a lot when I was younger or when I spent the day with my grandfather. You could follow the entire trail of the sun from dawn to dusk. That sounds nice. If these meetings go well, then perhaps I could get to see it one day too. Kurotsuchi gave a shrug. Maybe, but who really know? Besides, I haven't agreed to anything yet when it comes to our two villages. These meetings could go belly up for all we know. That's true. Naruto grinned while maintaining eye contact with the village. Kurotsuchi's bodyguard, who was once again ignoring his charge, was unaware that Naruto and Kurotsuchi's hand had moved slightly closer until their fingers brushed against each other. Without arousing suspicion, they held each other's hands and kept touching throughout their time atop the cage monument. Ground of Training 44 Eiji peered through the chain fence that stretched across the entire front of the Forest of Death and muttered, "This is Training Ground 44? I've never been here before." While Sakura and Sasuke hung back and gazed directly into the forest, he stood at the head of his team. While Eiji, Mito, and a few other clan children had heard about the renowned forest that few shinobi in Konoha would dare enter, it was immediately clear to all the genin that this was no typical forest. They had heard numerous tales of people who entered but never emerged. There were animals that lived and spawned here that were much bigger and more dangerous than any other. As she stood next to Shikamaru, who this time had a contemplative expression on his face as they gazed at the hazardous and dark forest, Mito added, "Chan would never let us come anywhere close to this place. She said we could easily get hurt here. Even worse if we went too far in." Anko jumped up onto a wooden crate and looked down at all the genin, saying, "Okay, all you kids listen up. Here are the rules for the second task. If you ignore or don't listen to what I'm about to tell you, then it could mean certain death. For this task, each team will be given one of two scrolls, the Heaven Scroll and the Earth Scroll." Anko reached into her trench coat pockets and took out a white and a blue scroll. There were gasps and shocked expressions on the faces of the genin, but Anko went on. "Then each team will enter through one of the gates along the fence of Training Ground 44, where you will then enter the forest. You will have to survive for 5 days in the Forest of Death in order to obtain the opposite scroll that you were given. In other words, you must obtain an Earth Scroll if you already possess a Heaven Scroll. After obtaining both, you have to head directly to the tower in the middle of the forest." "How do we obtain food?" Shoji inquired, looking appalled at the idea of going 5 days without eating. "You then locate some. It's up to you and your group once you're in that forest. Hunt, scavenge, whatever it takes." "That sounds fascinating." Anko turned to face the tall girl who stood in front of her two teammates and said, "I look forward to it." She didn't look particularly special and was dressed in typical Kusanin clothing, but there was a gleam in her eye that led Anko to assume she was looking forward to the idea of being in the Forest of Death. However, Anko felt a little queasy when she looked at her. It wasn't a big deal, but it caused her to glance at the girl twice before turning back to face the other girls. Something about her feels off. "Now get your scrolls and form a line with your teams. As soon as you have them, proceed directly to the gate you have been assigned. Let's get started, guys. Come on." Everyone else follows her slowly, not in a hurry to enter the forest where they might perish. "If we do this, we will be one step closer to being Chunin," Mito said before sprinting towards the Chunin tent where the scrolls were being distributed. As the teams stood at their designated gates, the 30 minutes flew by. Sakura, Sasuke, and Eiji stood next to each other and prepared to wait for the gates to open, while Team 7 waited in front of Gate 6 and farther down the line. Mito, Shikamaru, and Sai waited outside of Gate 13. All the other teams did the same and waited for their respective gates to open. Both Team 7 and Team 11 were able to obtain a Heaven Scroll, but they were not permitted to share it with anyone outside of their teams. Mito and Eiji both thought, "I can do this. I won't fall behind." They hoped that their teams had the same scroll because they didn't want to have to battle. Before long, the buzzer sounded, and the entire team darted into the forest, leaving only faint dust trails in their wake. As other Chunins and special Jonins went to carry out their responsibilities now that the second exam had officially begun, Anko watched all the teams disappear from view. Despite her intention to stay for the entire 5 days because she was the proctor, the feeling from earlier hadn't gone away, and she could feel something gnawing at the back of her mind. She decided she had to act because it didn't sit well with her. The Kusa Kunoichi who spoke up during the explanation said, "Itachi." A moment later, Itachi appeared beside her, his Anbu gear and face hidden by the crow's mask. She knew that her longtime friend was nearby and had been tasked with secretly reviewing the exam, and she would need him for this. "There's a problem with her. Watch her closely." "Got it." He vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving Anko to gaze out into the forest. Only a few minutes before they entered, the sound of genin fighting for the scrolls could already be heard. The Golden Leaf Hotel. As the day drew to a close, Kurotsuchi hummed to herself as she started to draw a bath for herself in her hotel suite. The remainder of the afternoon had gone pretty well, and she continued to act like Naruto for the duration of their time together, hoping that no one would notice the charade. Her time with the blonde knucklehead who somehow captured her heart was enjoyable, but it felt unfinished because they couldn't act normally around each other. She also enjoyed touring the village, but she wished she could have done it as herself rather than under a mask. The Hokage's wisdom in making her stay in the village as comfortable and luxurious as possible demonstrated that Konoha was serious about starting to build bridges with Iwa. Despite being notorious and widely despised for his role in the numerous lost shinobis her village faced during the Third War, the Yellow Flash had been kind to her up to this point. Although she would have preferred her old teammate Akatsuchi because she could reprimand him and keep him in the dark much easier due to his rather clumsiness and dimness, she made do and made sure Jiru saw and heard nothing of her time with Naruto. Her bodyguard Jiru was asleep in the next room, out like a light the moment his head hit the pillow. In all honesty, she wasn't sure why her grandfather had assigned him as her bodyguard during her stay in the Leaf, but she had no say in the matter. Kurotsuchi. A quick smile appeared on her face as she turned around, and then she heard the window latch shut once more before feeling the warmth of Naruto's arms envelop her. She retreated from the embrace, then turned and wrapped her arms around his neck and his snake around her waist, pressing their lips together as they slowly leaned against the wall. After being so close to each other all day, they were finally able to properly touch and embrace one another, which was driving them both crazy. They remained in that position for a few minutes and decided to make the most of their time together this evening. You entered, and nobody saw you. No one. When the Anbu who have been watching you since you arrived at your room switched over, I made sure to sneak in. We have about 5 minutes. 5 minutes was hardly enough, and Kurotsuchi showed her displeasure by sighing unhappily. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his shoulder. I know it's not easy, but these talks between Konoha and Iwa could be the bridge we need to finally go public with our relationship. As they remained in a close embrace, she felt his head drop and rest on top of hers. I know. It's just hard. I'm tired of all the secrecy. I just want us to be a normal couple and be able to go out in the street and do things couples usually do. With her face cupped between his palms, Naruto said, we will. Once these Chunin exams are all over with and the talks begin to go more positively, then we can reveal it to everyone. No one wants to reveal our relationship to everyone more than I do, but I know if we do it too soon then it could have a harmful effect on how these talks go. I know we have talked about this before, but we need to think about the well-being of the village before we make this announcement. She raised her hands and laid them over his. Yeah, I guess that is true. Our villages will likely feel the effect of this relationship. The son of the Hokage dating the Tsuchikage's granddaughter. Sounds like something out of our village's nightmares. Naruto chuckled, which also caused her to chuckle. Even so, they found it amusing to wonder how their families would react. There is no doubt that some people would handle it better than others. I suppose it would be significant, don't you think? Yeah, the biggest. They both laughed and held each other while they relished the thoughts. Naruto then peered through the bathroom door and noticed that the bath was still running. You running a bath? As she pressed herself against his chest and fiddled with the white bathrobe's hem, Kurotsuchi flashed a cunning smile. I might have been. Why? Naruto's expression changed to an equal-looking smirk as he took pleasure in her current behavior. Well, I've noticed that I'm starting to smell a little. Perhaps because I've been touring so much today. I believe it might be time for a bath. Well, that's not possible right now, is it? I suppose I may need to scrub you thoroughly with soap. She took his hand and led him into the bathroom, pushing the door open with her free hand, pausing briefly to look at him before saying, only if I can do the same with you. Won't it be a little suspicious if you suddenly walk out of here with your Anbu watching? Don't stress over that. I can sense everything in the hotel and know how to slink past them. I'm not missing out on our quality time together. Before she could say anything more, Kurotsuchi let out a high-pitched yelp, and Naruto abruptly drew her to him, lifting her up with his hands on her barely robed bottom. Their lips then locked, and Naruto slowly entered the bathroom while Kurotsuchi gradually removed her robe. With his hands behind his back and his body as rigid as a board, a pair of wrinkled onyx eyes gazed over at the hotel from the top of the cage building as they enjoyed their time together and reveled in each other's long-awaited warmth and desire. He had been watching the young blonde since he had left the cage building earlier in the afternoon and had witnessed him sneak into the hotel. As someone who loved and cared for Naruto, he felt compelled to inquire even though he didn't want to. Now he was happy that he had. What have you done, Naruto? After finally spending some time with Kurotsuchi in his own village, Naruto returned to his apartment with a smile on his face and a bounce in his step. Even though everything was still done in total secrecy, it was still a positive step. After Kurotsuchi ordered room service, they were able to enjoy a quick meal, some personal time, and a good soak in the bathtub. Just to be sure, he made sure it wasn't poisoned. Before going to bed, he stayed for almost 2 hours. Even though it was tempting, he didn't want to risk staying the night. Kurotsuchi, who slipped into the bed and patted the spot next to her, made things difficult as well. Despite his temptation, he knew it would be best to return home. For one night, they had already gambled enough. When Naruto turned around and saw Hiruzen seated in the armchair Itachi frequently used when he was with them, he nearly passed out. "Good evening, Naruto." The Sandaime was dressed as he usually is, with his head down, eyes closed, and arms folded across his chest. Naruto would have claimed to have dozed off in the chair if he hadn't known any better, but he didn't do any better with his grandfather figure. He was also taken aback that he was unable to sense him, but he knew that Hiruzen was the only one who could conceal their chakra signature from him. There was a reason he was called the Professor. Naruto removed his jacket and hung it on one of the hooks next to the door, saying, "Hey Gigi, you scared me there. What are you doing sitting here in the dark? We didn't make plans, did we? If we did, I'm really sorry that I forgot." Hiruzen gave a headshake. "No Naruto, we did not have plans. I simply decided to stop by. I have something I would like to talk to you about." Naruto approached and sat on the side of the sofa nearest to Hiruzen, intrigued. He wondered what he wanted to discuss at this hour. "You sure you should be up, Gigi? Normally you're in bed by 9. You sure that's good for your old bones?" Naruto shook his head when Hiruzen said, "You'll find, Naruto, these old bones still have some kick in them yet if you'd like to get another demonstration." He had no immediate plans to refight their fight in Chunin Stadium. "No, I was wondering where you have been tonight." Naruto didn't let anything slip, but Hiruzen kept a close eye on him. "I was with Enko over at the Forest of Death. I wanted to ask her how the twins were doing when she saw them. I left a little while ago when Itachi came to ask the same for Sasuke." "Is that so?" Naruto clarified. "Yeah, that's right." Hiruzen didn't seem particularly persuaded. He simply kept his stern gaze on Naruto while raising his hands and putting them together beneath his chin. Not thinking anything was wrong, Naruto leaned back in the chair, but Hiruzen started to lean in his direction. The blonde stepped back forward as he gestured for Naruto to lean closer. As he attempted to defend himself, Naruto's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Tell me, Naruto, why are you lying to me?" He started to scratch the back of his head with a frown on his face. "Gigi, I'm not lying. Why would you think I'm lying?" Hiruzen wanted to snicker, but he chose to maintain a composed expression, which always worried Naruto when he was in trouble. Naruto believed he was good at spotting lies, and his grandfather figure had methods for doing so. Alternatively, he had been reasonably proficient at it thus far. Panic rapidly grew in Naruto's chest, and he felt a lump form in his throat, because Naruto. "I visited Enko shortly after the genin went into the Forest of Death for their second exam and was told she sent Itachi inside the forest to keep an eye on some unsavory character that didn't sit well with her. That, and I saw Hana heading over towards her location an hour ago. I doubt you spoke to her while they were likely having one of their more intimate moments." Naruto shuffled uneasily in his seat after swallowing the lump in his throat. He believed he had taken great care. Unaware that Hiruzen had been observing him the entire time, he managed to slip past the Anbu with little difficulty and made no noise as he entered and exited the window. "Am I making a mistake? Does that distance still exist between us?" Naruto's face abruptly turned a deathly shade of pale that didn't suit him. "Naruto, tell me the truth. Or should I take a guess as to why you snuck into the Tsuchikage's granddaughter's room at the Golden Leaf Hotel? If Hiruzen was a big gambler, he would have won the grand prize at any casino." Hiruzen knew he was right on the money and just needed to wait for Naruto to confirm his suspicions. Looking back at the state Hiruzen was giving him, Naruto thought, I've slipped up. What do I do?" As much as he had wanted to share their relationship with others, he had hoped that it would have happened on his own terms rather than being thrust upon him in such a way. However, in a way, the shock and surprise he was experiencing now would probably be felt by the people they were going to tell. Particularly with his relatives. "I don't know what to do. I'm not prepared for this. At least not like this." As if he could read his thoughts, Hiruzen replied, "Just tell me the truth. I'll only find out by some other means, my boy. If it helps, then I will keep this conversation between us. This secret you have that ties you to the Iwakunoichi will remain a secret until you both decide to share it with others. However, right now I am asking you, Naruto. Is there something going on between the two of you?" "Yeah, Gigi," murmured Naruto. "There is something between us." Hiruzen placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said, "What is that, my boy? The room fell silent as they stared at each other, waiting for Naruto to say something. Hiruzen waited patiently for Naruto to speak, but the silence seemed to go on forever. Naruto was having an internal conflict as he attempted to balance the advantages and disadvantages but was unable to reach a consensus. He uttered the only words that came to mind because everything happened so quickly. Gigi. I love her. As he gradually returned his arm to being crossed against his chest, Hiruzen's expression softened and his eyes did too, like a domino effect. Still shuffled in his seat, Naruto watched Hiruzen out of the corner of his eye as he gazed at the floor, waiting for Hiruzen to say something else. He had no idea how he would respond. To be honest, he wasn't sure of his feelings for Iwa. Beyond the essential details, the conversation never really progressed. After inhaling deeply, Hiruzen finally said, Naruto. Start from the beginning, Naruto. How did this all start? Naruto spent the next 20 minutes telling Hiruzen everything. Well, Gigi. It went like this. It started I guess when I was on a mission with Makoto-sensei and Enko 4 years ago where I encountered Raiga Kurotsuchi. During his first year as a Guardian 12 member, he met Kurotsuchi at the Fire Daimyo's palace after running into him in the field against Raiga. During her brief stay, they became closer, and he used his summons to keep in touch for the next 2 years, allowing them to meet up whenever possible. In order to avoid giving Hiruzen the impression that he was constantly careless with Kurotsuchi, Naruto made sure to mention how cautious they were to avoid casting suspicion on him while they were together. Naruto shared his feelings about Kurotsuchi with Hiruzen. How she made him feel his best self and inspired him to become stronger for his family as well as for her, and vice versa. He laughed when she told the world how much he loved her and how she always keeps him on his toes. Unbeknownst to Naruto, Hiruzen started to comprehend Kurotsuchi more and became less worried about this problem the more he spoke about it. Hiruzen simply listened to what Naruto had to say without responding. Hiruzen acknowledged, I see. That's a lot to take in. The old Kage had a lot to process, but he had to return to Naruto's earlier remarks. You really do love her, don't you? While running a hand through his hair, Naruto whispered, yeah Gigi, I really do. She means more to me than anything in the world. He was grinning as he talked about her. I've never felt this way about anyone else before. As he nodded his head, Hiruzen thought, he truly is in love. I talk about my Bawako the same way he talks about her. He's not lying with his eyes. Nothing to do with it. Why did you keep a secret all this time? Why have you kept this secret for the last 2 years? Hiruzen inquired. Did you think we wouldn't approve? That we would be angry? Honestly, yes I did, Gigi. I'm not ashamed of my relationship with Kuro-chan, far from it in fact. But could you imagine what would happen if word about us got out when neither of us is ready to tell people? Naruto said. A Konoha shinobi dating an Iwa shinobi? It's unheard of. There are a lot of people in both our villages that would sooner see hell freeze over than let that happen. Naruto whispered, Gigi. Are you angry at me for keeping this for you? Do you disapprove of us? Hiruzen rubbed his forehead and sighed again. To be honest, he had not anticipated finding himself in this predicament with regard to Naruto. I'm not mad, Naruto. I'm honestly just surprised. In all my years I thought you would have eventually found a nice girl in the leaf to settle down with one day, to fall in love and start a family with. You falling in love with an Iwa shinobi, the granddaughter of their current Tsuchikage no less, is a lot for these old bones to take in. I know it's hard to imagine, Gigi. I never thought I would fall in love with her either. When it happened I was just as surprised as you are right now. I didn't know how it was going to work or how we would prove to everyone that's it real, but none of that really matters to me anymore. I love her, Gigi, and I don't want to be with anyone else. Said Naruto. She's just... When I'm with her I just feel whole, as if when she's next to me everything around me just looks and feels clearer. Do you understand what I mean? He was aware of Naruto's meaning. He could relate to Naruto's description of his feelings for Bawako. Yes, Naruto. I understand what you mean. Naruto, you understand that with this relationship the potential outcomes of revealing it not only to your family but to her family and both your respective villages might not be a happy one given our history. He heard Naruto say, I know. It's why we have been waiting for the right time. With Kurotsuchi acting as the envoy and voice of her grandfather in peace talks, what better time is there to reveal our relationship? It could even help the peace talks between our villages. Hiruzen told him, or it could destroy any hope of peace, which made Naruto feel a little less optimistic. But I can't deny the optimism. It could have potential success if handled correctly, and a lot of explaining is given to your families. Naruto stared at Hiruzen in surprise as he asked, so when do I get to meet her? Naruto's tone was higher than usual as he asked, you want to meet her? Of course. Now that I know, it would be rude of you not to introduce me to her. Hiruzen replied. Bring her to the Sarutobi compound in 2 days for dinner. I'll prepare my signature stew for us. Although he was pleased that his grandfather figure wanted to meet his girlfriend, he was still a little worried that others might find out without their knowledge. To the Sarutobi compound? Won't that be a little suspicious if we enter in nice clothes together? Won't the other Sarutobi clan members talk? He had already made a mistake once, and he hoped to Kami above that Kurotsuchi wouldn't be upset with him for Hiruzen finding out. Well, if your secrecy skills are as good as they were tonight, then perhaps you need to start practicing more on your espionage skills, my boy. Or would you prefer we have another lesson? Perhaps even Kurotsuchi can join us, since it appears she will be sticking around for a while. No, that's okay, Gigi. It's all good. I'll make sure to be more stealthy, I promise. He said, good. I expect no more secrets of this magnitude between us from now on, Naruto. Understood? But Naruto could tell he was speaking in his familiar Hokage tone. Yes, Gigi. You got it. The Death Forest. Eiji stood over the unconscious body of an AIM shinobi, face down on the ground, breathing raggedly through his breathing mask, and he called out, You okay, Sakura? He glanced over at his pink-haired teammate, keeping one of his tri-pronged kunai aimed at the fallen genin and watching him out of the corner of his eye. Although Sakura's clothing was ripped in a few places and she had a few scratches, she was otherwise in good condition. When they came across the AIM genin, her training with Shizune had fully taken effect, and it paid off when one of the AIM genin immediately started pursuing her while his teammates concentrated on Sasuke and Eiji. Sakura looked down at the dead genin at her feet and replied, I'm okay, Eiji. A little out of breath, but I'm okay. She could already feel her hands trembling as she gazed down at the body. It was her first kill as a shinobi. Blood was leaking from the genin's neck, where she had successfully slit his throat when he became preoccupied with Sasuke and Eiji eliminating his allies. Even though she had seen his hands go straight to his throat, the bleeding had not stopped. As his life dwindled, he eventually fell to the ground and completely stopped moving. Eventually, it was inevitable. Later, when you're alone, you can cry. I don't want to see Sasuke and Eiji. Her first kill was this one. Observing a similar expression on her face, Eiji pondered. 2 months ago, he made his first kill. When he got home, he recalled sobbing into his mother's arms. His mother had figured out what had happened based on the expression on his face. Before she started talking to him about it, she had held him for roughly 10 minutes. When he got home, his father followed suit, making sure he understood that what he was doing was acceptable, that he was obeying orders, and that he was protecting himself. Sasuke, have you got the scroll? Sasuke appeared slightly breathless but otherwise unharmed after his opponent was beaten and bound to a tree with ninja wire. Reaching into his pocket, he produced the earth scroll so his teammates could see it. Sakura smiled, and so did Eiji. In their minds, that was the difficult part. They only needed to reach the tower in the center of the forest now. To scout the tops of the trees, Eiji created a clone that was able to see the tower in the distance. If they exerted themselves, they would arrive in roughly 20 minutes if Sakura's calculations were correct, which they usually were. The decision was simple for them because none of them wanted to remain in the forest full of monsters any longer than necessary. As he put away his weapons, Sasuke told them, We'll go straight to the tower. There's no point for us being out here any longer. We have what we came for, so let's finish this second task before any of the other teams find us. Sakura followed suit, and Eiji struck the downed AIM shinobi in the back of the head, knocking him out and rendering him no longer a threat. I'm already missing my bed, even though we've only been out here since yesterday. As they gathered up some of the loose gear they had used and misplaced during the battle, Sakura reminded her teammates, watching for bandits in the middle of the night is very different from keeping an eye out for giant snakes and spiders in the night. The three of them stood together, jumped up into the trees, and were ready to start running at full speed when a voice suddenly came into view. You and me both, Sakura. Eiji agreed, and Sasuke simply nodded. Now let's get out of here. They all turned to face one of the Kusa shinobi from earlier, who was leaning against the tree with her arms folded and staring directly at them. I'm afraid it won't be so easy. Her voice sent a chill down their spines, and they saw that she was staring at them the way a snake would look at a mouse. With Sasuke and Eiji standing in front of Sakura, kunai drawn and pointing in the direction of, What do you want? The three genins immediately leapt away and landed on a thick branch a few meters away. Are you interested in our scrolls? Eiji demanded. You can't have them, though. Yeah, Sakura continued, if you want them, you have to go through us. To their astonishment, though, the girl just laughed, and her laugh made the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. It sounded so ominous, so unsettling that the three of them had to take a little step back. Eiji pondered, Is she like Haku? Have we met someone of that level? She's not scared. We outnumber her 3-1 and she's not scared in any way. I don't like this. Something about her feels off. Sasuke thought, and he activated his Sharingan, his eyes spinning with 2 red eyes, 1 Tomo in one eye and 2 in the other, after deciding it was best to keep their guard up around this person. They were shocked to see that the girl was practically salivating at the sight of Sasuke's Sharingan, and as soon as he activated his Sharingan, a big smile spread across her face, and they watched as a long tongue emerged from her mouth. What am I asking you? She chuckled again before the trio watched in panic and disgust as her hands came up to her face and peeled off a small portion of her face, revealing skin so white it could match snow and golden eyes with a slit for a pupil. I want you, Sasuke. In the blink of an eye, the girl appeared in front of Sakura, Eiji, and Sasuke before they could exchange words. She kicked Eiji in the stomach, knocking him off the branch and to the ground. When the girl's attention shifted to him, Sasuke thought, fast, I didn't even see him move, and he leapt away, ignoring Sakura, who watched as the dangerous girl pursued him before gaining courage and pursuing her. Eiji winced as he slowly stood up, holding his stomach with the wind knocked out of him. She is not your typical genin, she has iron-like kicks. While weaving in and out of trees, Sasuke observed the girl pursuing him and rapidly catching up to him. After he demonstrated a few hand signals, he yelled, fire style. Fireball jutsu. To his surprise, the girl just withstood the fireball and emerged from it with blackened skin that was burned all over. Sasuke reacted as quickly as he could, pulling out multiple kunai and throwing them towards her. They hit their mark, and a small explosion went off that knocked Sasuke back. Looking up from his down position, Sasuke watched as he gulped when he saw the girl emerge from the explosion again looking exactly the same as before. You'll have to do better than that, she said, with a sick smile on her face, before lunging towards him. Sasuke went through more hand signals while holding his fist firmly. Fire-style Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Several flower-shaped fireballs were aimed at the girl as the fire blazed through the air, but she skillfully sidestepped every blow, making it appear so simple that Sasuke couldn't help but wonder who she was. The girl lunged at him again before he could launch another attack, but this time she was able to grab him and pin him to the tree with a hand around his throat. Sasuke struggled to breathe because her grip was so tight, and he felt her other hand come up and pull down his collar to reveal his neck. Her mouth opened wide, and Sasuke's eyes widened when a strangely large set of fangs appeared in her mouth and were aimed at the side of his neck. He struggled, but his throat was crushed, and he was unable to get enough air to continue. The sound of swirling was heard just before the fangs touched the skin, and the girl growled in frustration before leaping away when Eiji showed up. Rasengan! He yelled as he aimed for the girl's chest, but before it could touch down, the girl grabbed his hand and swung him through the air. Using the tree walking technique, Eiji was flung into the air, but he somehow landed on the side of the tree, adhering to the bark. It's amazing that I learned this technique at such a young age. The girl mockingly remarked, I see your parents have taught you well, but you're not the one I want. I might let you live if you leave. You will die if you stay. Eiji glared at the girl and said, forget it, as Sakura appeared beside Sasuke and examined his throat for any damage. I will never abandon a teammate. As a leaf shinobi, I know that we never abandon our allies. You go through me if you want him. As Eiji gathered 2 clones around him, the girl sighed and said, so young. How unfortunate that you had to pass away so quickly. She raised her thumb and bit into the skin, drawing a line of her own blood on a tattoo on her wrist. Calling upon jutsu. Eiji's 2 clones were instantly destroyed when a huge puff of smoke appeared, knocking him down. He covered his face with his hand and waved away some of the smoke, but he quickly regretted it when he saw a big set of golden eyes staring back at him. Snake. When the snake lunged at him with its jaws wide open, Eiji yelled, but instead of escaping, the girl appeared next to him and kicked him hard again, straight into the snake's mouth. His eyes widened in terror as the world around him darkened, and then he found himself landing and sliding down the massive snake's throat. Eiji! Sakura shouted as Sasuke looked at the snake in shock. Neither could believe what had just happened as they watched the snake turn its attention to them. Its tongue flicked out of its mouth as the girl landed on top of its head, looking right back at Sasuke. Girl, if I were you I would run. I want to say it a 3rd time. Sakura and Sasuke's bodies trembled and both fell to their knees as a tremendous amount of killing intent struck them like a boulder, immobilizing them both because the force was simply too great for them to handle. It was similar to Zabuza from Wave Country, but 10 times more powerful, so great that they were barely able to breathe. Sakura and Sasuke covered their eyes as some of the snake's body contents rained down through the air and splashed over the trees and the ground, but they both felt a wave of relief when they saw Eiji push himself out of the now dead snake and fall to the ground with the snake. The girl was about to step off the snake again when a swirling sound could be heard, but this time it came from beneath them. "I'm never doing that again," Eiji muttered as he coughed and spat out some of the blood from the snake that had gotten into his mouth. He then stood up steadily, his legs trembling from the shock of what had happened, a mixture of fear and adrenaline running through his body, before he returned his attention to the girl who had caused the disgusting incident. He grabbed one of his kunai tightly and said, "Get the hell away from them, you bitch. My Chan doesn't like it when I swear, but since she's not around, I think I can get away with it." She taunted, My what a mouth you have." Then, Eiji ran to her and started practicing taijutsu, aiming to kill, specifically her neck and heart. He was fed up with what should have been an easy pass to the next task, so he threw punches and kicks at her head, but the girl would either block or dodge the swipes, pushing him away a moment later. Eiji continued to do this for about 2 minutes, during which time he felt his temper rising at how easily this girl was evading his blows, as if she were not exerting any effort. Water bullet jutsu is the water style. With the intention of harming this girl or worse, Eiji's mouth spit out dozens of large glomps of water at his opponent. However, similar to the fire jutsu, the girl gracefully avoided the bullets, and the attacks only affected the ground and trees. Sakura told her teammate, "Sasuke, we need to help Eiji." However, Sakura noticed that Sasuke was in a state of shock and fear, hardly moving, his eyes only watching his teammate fight a battle he couldn't win. "We're unable to prevail. She is too powerful. We're going to die," Sasuke whispered, but Sakura heard him and appeared to be about to cry as he said it. Had Sasuke really given up like that? Had the boy she had a long-term crush on just given up like that while their teammate was fighting an impossible battle? No, she couldn't just give up, so Sakura did something she never thought she would do. She raised her hands and slapped Sasuke across the face, shocking him out of his fear and making him look at her in shock. She yelled at him, "You might have gone up, but I won't let our teammate fight this battle alone." She got a kunai out of her pouch and entered the fray, even though she knew she had no chance and wasn't going to let her fear rule her while her teammate fought an impossible battle. "Sakura," Sasuke thought as he watched Sakura leap in. The Kusa shinobi immediately showed no interest in engaging in combat with her. In fact, Sasuke believed she appeared more irritated by the battle she was in, as evidenced by the way her gaze flickered back towards him, indicating that she was not taking it seriously. "Hey, remember us?" Eiji shouted, going through hand signs as he prepared to fire a jutsu, water-style wall. Eiji paused in the middle of his sentence, and his whole body went numb as a wave of pain he had never experienced before swept through his stomach. He heard Sakura scream bloody murder, and his eyes briefly shifted to Sasuke, whose face changed to one of horror before slowly moving down to his stomach and coughing up a glob of blood that fell on the tree branch. A sword with a gold handle was being wielded by his opponent's long tongue, and the girl showed no interest in him, glancing back only at Sasuke as if to further mock him. Eiji's vision began to blur and darken, and all he could hear was Sakura screaming his name in the dark, eerie chuckle from the Kusa shinobi. The terrible sound of the blade coming out of his stomach caused his hands to reach for the wound before he fell to his knees as he felt his body shut down from shock. He eventually fell off the tree they were standing on. "Eiji?" Mito held her hand to her chest, her eyes softening and looking worried as she looked off in the distance, her heart feeling as though something was holding it tightly and actually causing her some discomfort. She felt fine just a moment ago, but as if out of nowhere the thought of her twins suddenly popped into her mind and the pain started. Mito whispered as she looked off to the left, stopping at the top of a nearby tree. Shikamaru and Sai both saw her stop abruptly and stopped as well a moment later. Mito wasn't sure why she stopped, but this shiver went up her spine that brought the hairs to the back of her neck. "Mito? What is it?" Sai remained silent and simply observed as Shikamaru asked, emerging next to her. She acknowledged, "I don't know. Something feels wrong. I can't explain it. I think something happened to Eiji." As Naruto approached the Hokage Tower, his whole body froze in mid-step. He was traveling to see his father, who was probably still speaking with Kurotsuchi at the time and was occupying a bento box that his mother had made for him. After a rather stressful night's sleep, he had completed some training in the morning, and the day had proceeded fairly normally. He was awake for several hours before he finally managed to get some sleep because of the entire situation with Hiruzen. He had been using his sensory abilities to periodically check on his brother and sister, knowing they were somewhere in the forest of Deet Hat at the moment. He assumed they were doing alright because everything felt good so far. That was until a moment ago, anyway. Eiji. He abruptly lost his chakra. It has fallen so far. Dangerous low, he reflected. The only time someone's chakra goes that way is when. Eiji. He yelled, frightening those around him. He flung the bento box to the floor and started running toward the forest of death. Sakura screamed and jumped after him, but she, Sasuke, and the Kusa shinobi were all taken aback when Eiji's limp body abruptly disappeared from thin air, leaving no sign of its whereabouts. The Kusa shinobi wondered, where did the body go? Before a rare chill ran up her spine. Where did that come from? When a powerful chakra signature appeared just a few meters away, she stopped and slowly turned her head, letting her nerves be tested for the first time today as two fully mature Sharingans swung dangerously at her. Sasuke turned his head to his right and, for the first time in a long time, he choked up a sob at the person standing next to him. Sakura, who hurried over to them, was also shedding a few tears as hope finally showed itself to them. Wearing his Anbu gear and holding a mask over his head, Itachi Uchiha stood beside his younger brother, holding an unconscious and injured Eiji Namikaze in his arms. The boy was breathing, but it was shallow, and blood was still dripping from the wound. Feeling pain in his heart, he gazed down at his best friend's injured little brother and said, I should have gotten here sooner. He was able to give me the slip and my mistake have had consequences. To get Sasuke's attention, Itachi said, Sasuke, go with the clone towards the tower. Before medical professionals can tend to Eiji, the clones will do everything in their power to keep him alive. I want you to run as quickly as you can to the tower with Sakura. Never pause for anything or anyone. Tell the closest Chunin or join what transpired and instruct them to retrieve the Hokage and his wife once you reach the tower. Does that make sense? Both genin were unable to speak and simply nodded as Itachi turned Eiji over to the clone, who immediately bounded through the trees to the tower, promising to arrive in a minute or two at full speed. Sasuke and Sakura immediately followed, glanced back at Itachi for a brief moment, and then turned to face forward. Itachi's blood-soaked hand went to his side, quickly turning into a fist that trembled slightly, knowing that they were now safe, or at least away from the shinobi that stood in front of him. Itachi didn't like it when his emotions overcame him, but this was one of those times when, in spite of his composed demeanor and stoic face, he felt his blood boil and his rage pushing against his will. He whispered, Orochimaru, as he gazed directly into the golden eyes of the person who was actually hiding behind that skin. You know who I am, don't you? The Kusa shinobi inquired. I guess the genius of the Uchiha clan shouldn't have surprised me. Maybe now I can finally get out of this skin. The shinobi threw off the headband, ran a hand through his long black hair, and then smiled at Itachi, tearing away the other side of the tanned skin until only the face of a shinobi that the entire world knew was left. It was so stuffy behind that skin, he said. Itachi told him, you made a mistake coming here. All he received in return was a laugh from the pallid shinobi. The only thing I did wrong was not finish the blonde brat sooner. Maybe I ought to have gone for the heart or the throat. It doesn't matter either way. Since Sasuke is so young, I would have preferred him, but I suppose you will have to settle for him. However, considering your reputation, this might take a little longer than I had anticipated. Orochimaru's eyes were hungrily focused on Itachi, who ignored the red eyes staring down at him despite his tongue licking his lips. Before Orochimaru shot through the air with the sword that had injured Eiji protruding from his mouth, Itachi uttered the words, admitting that you came here for Sasuke and gloating that you hurt a child I have known since he was a baby was the biggest mistake you could have made. Everything happened in a few seconds, but it was all it took for the roles to be reversed. Orochimaru felt incredibly confident that he finally had the prize he had been pursuing for a long time, but that confidence was shattered the next second when a black pinwheel suddenly engulfed him.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.